Chapter 208. Are you planning to kill him tonight? Isn't this a bit too much? After understanding Ryuto's meaning, Colored Glaze couldn't help but frown slightly. Colored Glaze wasn't a saint who opposed killing, but she believed that killing indiscriminately wasn't a good thing. At least from the current situation, although John's mouth was foul, his character was bad, and he didn't know what to do. He didn't deserve to die. Colored Glaze felt that sentencing him to death just because of his foul mouth towards Ryuto and his desire to pursue Yunyen was a bit too much. After all, with Yunyen's god-level charm, her suitors could be said to be everywhere. If Ryuto killed a suitor, wouldn't he become a homicidal maniac like I am? He didn't just simply pursue Yunyen and provoke me. Sensible once said that there was a bastard called John Teddy who specialized in deceiving women, and he also collected some special photos. It should be him. This person deserves to die. Although Sensible hadn't actually investigated John, Ryuto's words were true. After all, he was a transmigrator and had some understanding of most of the characters that appeared in the plot. In the history of John Teddy, this scumbag, there were at least dozens of girls that he defiled and took photos of. The most exaggerated was that there were even a few girls that didn't submit to him that were killed by John using various methods. The reason for John's evil habit was very simple. It actually stemmed from his sense of superiority. I'm an American. I'm a superior. The meaning of life for you East Asians is to be plundered by me, to be conquered by me. This is God's charity to you. This evil thought was deeply ingrained in John's heart, so much so that when he met a girl that didn't want to be plundered by him, it was as if he was severely insulted and had a strong killing intent. Kill, kill, kill. You're just a lowly person, yet you dare to reject the charity of a superior person. She must be a demon. She should go to hell. After listening to Ryuto's description, even Colored Glaze couldn't help but cover her mouth in disbelief. How can this be? There's actually such a scumbag in this world. He's really a piece of trash that has broken through the limits of the lowest level. Do you still think there's something wrong with what I did? No problem. Colored Glaze nodded and explained, but he's also in the Great Beauty Association. Before we kill him, we have to dig out the relevant information. After learning that John was such an evil person, Luli couldn't help but wonder if his appearance in the Great Beauty Association was just a coincidence. Also, was it really just an accident that John got close to Auntie Jinqin and took a fancy to Yunyen based on Jinqin's description? One should know that the Tsukujiri Group was a large-scale high-tech company. The company's output was in the trillions, and it was a monster group that owned tens of thousands of patents. It was a technological overlord in the Far East. Most importantly, the Tsukujiri Group wasn't listed. Most of the power was still in the hands of the founder, Kyoji. The entire company was basically under his control. Kyoji only had one daughter. After the couple passed away, this daughter would naturally be the only legal successor of this technological empire. In this case, the meaning of marrying Yunyen was completely different. After all, as long as he could convince Yunyen, he could obtain absolute control of the Tsukujiri Group. Did John want Yunyen because of his own selfish desires? Or was there someone behind him who wanted to take over the Tsukujiri Group? Or was it the Great Beauty Association that wanted to take over the Tsukujiri Group? Thinking of this, Colored Glaze felt a chill run down her spine. It was as if there was an unexpected conspiracy behind this. She wanted to gather as much information as possible. But to be honest, Ryuto didn't care much about these conspiracies. He would just deal with whatever came his way. In fact, he only wanted John's life. After all, senior sister Yunyen was already Long Do's official girlfriend. It was really annoying for a foreigner like him to keep thinking about his girlfriend. Just based on this point alone, he deserved to die. And so, on that night, a kidnapping case targeting John Teddy slowly began. Not long after, at the entrance of the Tsukujiri villa, Aunt Jinqin was sending off a guest. Aunt Jinqin, you can drop me off here. John came to the door and turned to Jinqin with a smile. Thank you very much for your oil painting. I'm very satisfied with it. Although it was just on the surface, John was indeed quite knowledgeable when it came to painting. He praised it so much in front of Jinqin, which made Jinchin feel that this young man was quite knowledgeable. That's good. Come over when you're free. I will. See you next time. After the two members of the Great Beauty Association exchanged some pleasantries, John got into a car and slowly left with a few bodyguards following him. When Jinchin returned to the living room, she realized that Yun Yen was sitting there alone. The Colored Glaze and Ryuto, who were supposed to be together, were long gone. Mom, that person left. He left. Where's Miss Colored Glaze? What about your other friend? They left an hour ago. They said they had something important to take care of back home. I see. Then there's nothing I can do. I wanted to introduce the Great Beauty Association to them. Seeing Kamiyoshi's daughter and the fierce-looking young man leave without a word, Jinchin couldn't help but reveal a regretful expression. However, just as the mother and daughter were chatting, 3 high-profile white sedans were driving along the winding mountain road outside the Yugi Villa towards the street below. The Tsukujiri Villa was located halfway up the mountain. If one wanted to drive up or down, they had to pass through this winding road. Phew. That's about it for today. I'll have to work harder next time and take down that girl as soon as possible. Right now, John was sitting in the back seat with his legs crossed in an arrogant manner. He took out a luxurious lighter from his chest and lit up a cigar. After taking a puff, he revealed a relaxed expression. In the eyes of the experienced John, dealing with the foolish mother and daughter wasn't difficult at all. Thus, the plan to take over the Tsukujiri Corporation shouldn't be too difficult. If he was fast enough, he might be able to finish it in a few years. As for how to finish it in a few years, he just had to make Tsukujiri Kyoji and Jinchin accidentally die after marrying Miss Tsukujiri. That was John's specialty. When he thought about how he would be able to own such a huge company and become the leader and pioneer of the technology world, where there would be countless beauties, flowers, and applause wherever he went, John was so excited that his body turned numb and he almost peed his pants. What? You're saying I didn't invent the technology? What does that have to do with anything? As long as the company is mine, it's fine. He. Ha ha ha. He. Just like that, wretched laughter kept coming out from the back seat of the car. However, the 2 burly men in suits sitting in the front seat and the front passenger seat didn't react at all. Their faces were cold, their bodies were sturdy, and their eyes were like torches. It was obvious that they were professionals in the security industry. They were elites that John brought from his hometown. In addition to the 2 bodyguards, there were also several bodyguards in the 2 cars in front and behind. After all, as the young master of the Teddy Group, John would always bring a bodyguard team of more than a dozen people with him wherever he went to ensure his personal safety. The strength of this group of bodyguards was quite good, and there were many of them. It was not easy to get past their obstruction and attack John. Of course, for some people, that wasn't the case. As the 3 cars sped forward unhurriedly on the winding mountain road, in the dark night, a figure that almost blended into the darkness appeared on the mountain wall on the side of the road. It was a tall and slender young man wearing a black trench coat and a white mask on his face. He had been waiting here for a long time. The man in the black trench coat, who stood on the mountain wall about 50 meters high and looked at the cars on the road below, was naturally Ryuto, who hadn't worn this uniform for a long time. When the car carrying John drove over here, Ryuto stared at the car in the middle as if he was observing prey. At the same time, he gave orders to his subordinates on the other side of the headset and microphone. Narukai, Monado. Target in place, do it. Yes, boss. After hearing Ryuto's words, Narukai, who was waiting in a heavy truck on the other side of the mountain wall, also nodded to Monado with an axe. Ha! As the axe in Monado's hand fell, the rope that tied the huge rolling wood piled up like a hill to the top of the truck broke, and the wood that was already unstable rolled to the side of the road. Rumble. Rumble, rumble, rumble. For a time, dozens of rolling wood that was 7 or 8 meters long and tens of centimeters wide rolled down from the mountain wall quickly, smashing directly at the front of the 3 cars that were coming this way. What? This is... After seeing a large pile of wood suddenly falling from the sky, the car driving at the front quickly stepped on the brakes at the fastest speed, but the car still hit a pile of rolling wood and almost flipped over on the spot. As for the 2 cars following behind, although they were better, they were forced to stop. After all, the road ahead was almost completely blocked by the wood falling from the sky, and it was impossible for vehicles to pass through. The bodyguard team hired by John was elite, so they immediately realized that this was definitely not an accident, but someone deliberately wanted to stop the car. So the captain, who was in charge of the command corps of the entire security work and was also sitting in the second car with John, quickly commanded through the headset, "Go back. Go back immediately. Don't." But before he finished speaking, Ryuto, who was on the mountain wall above his head, also made a move at the same time. Chapter 209. Want to go back and run? Not a chance. Not long ago, Long Do, who had been looking down from the 50-meter-high cliff, was holding a huge object that was at least 2 meters long and made of 2 thick steel bars twisted together. Gangsters don't die barehanded. Activate. At the same second when the second vehicle carrying John was forced to stop, Dragon Fight activated his special ability and hurled the huge steel bar down like a javelin. He squatted down slightly, and his waist quickly rotated with strength. That big thing that weighed at least a few dozen caddies fell down like an arrow from a bow. With a loud roar, it penetrated the front cover of the car. If the giant steel bar only penetrated the front cover of the car, it would be fine, but everyone in the car could clearly see that the part of the steel bar that sank was far higher than the height of the car. In other words, the giant steel bar thrown out by Ryuto was like a huge nail that nailed the car to the ground. What kind of terrifying strength was this? What kind of unimaginable scene was this? At this time, although the car's wheels were still slowly turning in the opposite direction, the car couldn't move back even a millimeter. It was nailed to the ground and there was no chance to run. Damn it! Master John, get down. Don't move. Just when the car was completely penetrated by the giant steel bar and was deeply embedded in the ground, the captain responsible for protecting John immediately yelled at the trembling and bewildered John, who didn't know what happened. What's going on? What's going on? In John's past delusions, he had imagined this situation countless times. Suddenly, an unknown crisis appeared. As a handsome man destined to save the world, he would inevitably rush out to kill the enemy and save everyone. But the moment this unexpected incident occurred, he actually didn't need the captain's reminder. He quickly covered his head with both hands and crouched down under the back seat, and curled up as much as possible. I'm not afraid. I'm just waiting for the best time to appear. The protagonist always appears last. While hiding under the back seat, John unconsciously comforted himself frantically in his mind. Unfortunately, this level of comfort was of no use at all. He was only deceiving himself. Everyone get out of the car. Prepare to meet the enemy. After confirming that his car couldn't be driven away, the bodyguard captain could only grit his teeth and issue this order. He quickly took out a small black pistol from under his seat, ready to fight to the death with the enemy. The other bodyguards also took out anti-explosion shields, stun batons, pistols, and even shotguns. They were ready to get out of the car and fight the enemy. At the very least, they had to kill the first batch of enemies and give John a chance to change cars and escape. However, just as the captain of the bodyguards kicked open the car door and rushed out to meet the enemy, a dark figure took advantage of the darkness to descend from the sky like a ghost. It landed on the roof of the car that John was in. It had to be said that the bodyguards in charge of protecting John were indeed capable. They protected the surroundings of the car very tightly. However, in front of the current Ryuto, this level of protection was meaningless. Before the others could react, the black shadow that descended from the sky had already reached its hand into the roof of the car below. That pair of gloved palms suddenly tore and lifted outwards. The entire roof of the car was broken open with his bare hands. It exposed the passengers inside. Generally speaking, among all the parts of a car, the roof was the thinnest and had the weakest protection. That thin layer of iron was like a bubble in front of Long Do's current strength. It had no protective effect at all. After breaking open the roof, the dark figure quickly rushed in and grabbed John, who was shivering under the seat, by the back of his neck, and grabbed him like a chicken. "Goodbye, everyone." Ryuto, who quickly took John out of the car, flipped back to the roof of the car, jumped up while avoiding the bodyguards around him, and threw out the hook in his hand. In the previous night's battle, Dragon Fight had already understood how useful this rope hook was. If it was used smoothly, it could even move in 3 dimensions as easily as Spider-Man. Therefore, Ryuto had also practiced using the hook, and now he was quite familiar with it. The next moment, the grappling hook he threw out accurately hooked onto a big tree on the mountain wall dozens of meters away. Then, he grabbed John's shoulder with one hand and quickly coiled the rope with the other. Then, he flew up into the sky. From Ryuto descending from the sky, tearing open the roof of the car and taking John away, to him using the hook to quickly escape. The entire process took at most 2 to 3 seconds. It was so fast that it was unbelievable, like a nightmare. What is going on? Who is this person? Even a deity came to kidnap? Suddenly, all the bodyguards who were ready to fight the kidnappers outside were dumbfounded. After all, even if they were professionals, they had never seen such a ridiculous kidnapping method. Descending from dozens of meters high, tearing open the roof of the car with bare hands, grabbing and escaping with a hook. Are you filming a Hollywood blockbuster? Speaking of which, if a kidnapper like you has the ability to rob the cash truck, why did you have to kidnap young Master John alone? Isn't this a waste of talent? But complaining was complaining. This group of bodyguards still had to quickly find young Master John, even if it was just a little bit of tracking the kidnappers. But after hurriedly sending people to search around, the captain of the bodyguards didn't find anything meaningful other than an unlicensed abandoned truck. He could only sigh and say, "Phew, this is big trouble." Quickly inform young Master John's family that young Master John was kidnapped by kidnappers. Let them prepare the ransom or something. Logically speaking, this group of professional bodyguards should bear the greatest responsibility for failing to protect their employer, and they should be very depressed. But in fact, including the captain of the bodyguards, this group of bodyguards didn't look depressed at all. Instead, they were rejoicing that they had survived a disaster. Because they were very clear about one thing: the strength of the kidnappers was so terrifying that even if they didn't use this kidnapping method of tearing open the roof of the car, they could still kill all of these bodyguards and swagger away. But the group of kidnappers didn't choose to do so, which could be said to be a great thing for the bodyguard group because they were considered to have survived. Failure at work was not terrible, the key was to save their own lives. Anyway, the other party was a god, and it was not shameful for the employer to be kidnapped by a god. As for the employer's life, he could only pray for himself. Anyway, in the view of the captain of the bodyguards, kidnappers generally just wanted money. As long as the Teddy group could afford the ransom, young Master John should still be able to come back alive. Of course, the premise of this assumption was that the kidnappers came for money, not for personal vendetta or other things. Obviously, John himself thought so, although he had fainted when Ryuto grabbed his neck and lifted him out of the car. Voila! After some time, a burst of bone-chilling coldness accompanied by the discomfort of being soaked all over woke John up from his coma. Pfft! Who is? When he was awakened by someone splashing water on him, John instinctively wanted to curse, but halfway through, he remembered what happened before. No, something is wrong? Have I been kidnapped? Suddenly, John realized that he seemed to be sitting on a chair with his hands firmly tied behind his back. His eyes were also covered with a piece of black cloth, which made him unable to see the surrounding environment. Good Lord, this was a 100% standard kidnapping suit. The only thing missing was a stinky sock stuffed in his mouth. Are you awake, idiot? As a cold voice entered John's ears, a hand pulled the black cloth from his face, and what followed was a fierce light. Ugh! Ah! From extreme darkness to an intense burst of light, Hardedef felt as if his eyes were about to be blinded. He also felt an intense pain in his head, which made him scream involuntarily. Mercy! Let me go! You can have as much money as you want. My family is very rich. Because he could not bear this level of torture, John immediately shouted at the top of his lungs. However, his surrender didn't have any effect. The strong light was still shining fiercely at his eyes. After a long time, when John was dizzy and almost fainted again, but he could not pass out because of the strong light, the violent light finally stopped. At this time, John could only shout weakly, Good man, spare me. Ha 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 ha. After hearing his very spineless words, there was a burst of laughter in the room. John could vaguely distinguish that the laughter should come from 3 men, one of them was younger, and the other 2 were more rugged. Boss, this guy is too useless. Isn't it just a strong light shining on him, and he almost peed in his pants? That's right, this level of interrogation is like scratching an itch in our underworld. What a young master who has never seen the world. 2 of them seemed to be amused by John's embarrassment at this time, and they laughed and mocked him. On the other hand, the 3rd person strode to John's side, rubbed his head, and said with a smile, "Don't say that. He's a hero who's going to save the world. He's the main character on the stage. Only such a spotlight is worthy of him. Right, Brother John?" Don't, ha. Just when John instinctively wanted to say, don't dare, he suddenly felt that the voice next to him was somewhat familiar. At this time, his eyes that were blinded by the strong light could faintly see something, so John turned his head and happened to see the young man about 16 or 17 years old, who seemed to be still in high school, smiling devilishly at him, the hero who saved the world. Chapter 210. This guy is, who is he? When he saw Ryuto's handsome face without a mask, Hardadef instinctively wanted to yell, but he realized that he didn't know his name at all. Indeed, the 2 of them only shook hands in the Suki villa. Ryuto didn't say his name, so Hardadef didn't know who this brat was. However, at this time, Ryuto smiled and said, "Sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I am Ryuto Kiryu, the leader of the Rulong group." Tong Sheng. Ryuto? After hearing this name, Hardadef first thought about it and felt that the name was familiar. But 2 seconds later, his face turned pale. This was because he recalled the heroic legends of the young master of the Dragon Group that he had heard from many people. It was said that the Rulong Group's Sakata consultant wanted to go out alone and establish the Sakata Group. However, the young master had taken action out of anger. He had charged into the Sakata Gumi's headquarters alone and killed all the traitors in one night. Then, he had captured Sakata Gumi and sentenced him to death. It was said that not long ago, this young master kidnapped the young lady of the Saito Club, and then received the highest bounty of 1 billion yen in history and was hunted by the entire underground world. But this young master laughed and sent away the group of idiots that came to kill him and wanted to take his head. In just one night, the number of casualties was in the tens of thousands. It was said that this young master of the Rulong Group had fighting skills comparable to Bruce Lee, a body comparable to the Terminator, and guerrilla fighting ability comparable to Rambo. He could smash a wall with one punch, jump over a wall that was more than 10 meters tall, and sprint faster than a car. The only thing he lacked was the Kamehameha. Otherwise, he wouldn't need to change his style to participate in the World Martial Arts Tournament. Of course, Hardadef always scoffed at this kind of legend. After all, he knew that Ryuto was just a brat in his teens, just a high school student. Just a Japanese high school student. What's so great about him? Humph. Those legends must have been made up by him to scare those cowards, right? However, when he found out that he had been kidnapped and the kidnapper was Ryuto Kiryu, he was shocked. Only then did John realize that the stories he had heard before weren't made up. To be able to bypass a professional bodyguard team of more than a dozen people to kidnap him, and the planning time was only a short 1 hour. This was not something an ordinary person could do. Gulp. Thus, Hardadef couldn't help but gulp and ask with trepidation, "Young Master Ryuto, is there some misunderstanding between us?" Misunderstanding? No, I don't think there's any misunderstanding between us. She graduated from the University of Pennsylvania. That. Right, your family is still Teddy Group, right? His father is one of the top 500 companies in the world, and his father is one of the richest people on the "Are You Convinced" list. He has 100,000 employees. Actually, the most important thing is that when I take a closer look, you're really quite handsome and sunny. You really look like a typical movie protagonist. As Ryuto spoke, he took out a small knife from nowhere and used the sharp blade to draw on John's face. When he felt the sharp blade with a bone-piercing chill across his face, John almost wet his pants. He hurriedly broke out in cold sweat and whispered, "No, no, no, I'm just joking. Young Master Ryuto, don't take it seriously." A rich kid like John could usually bully weak girls, but he had never experienced such a situation. The kid's face was ashen, and he was sweating like an ant on a hot pan. His previous attitude of, "I'm the protagonist," was nowhere to be found. That's strange. Ryuto sneered. The American hero who is responsible for saving the world and always stands at the center of the stage is actually this kind of person? Didn't the protagonists in the movies go through all kinds of torture without changing their expressions? Movies are just movies, they're all fake. Don't take it seriously. Is that so? I don't believe it. You're so brave, you definitely won't be afraid of pain, right? After sensing the change in Ryuto's tone, John hurriedly shouted, "Wait. Let's talk nicely, don't. Woo 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 woo." But before he could finish his sentence, a heart-wrenching pain suddenly came from Hardadef's left hand. At the same time, there was a crisp cracking sound. In the blink of an eye, it really happened in the blink of an eye. Long Do silently reached out and grabbed one of Hardadef's fingers that were tied behind his back. Then, he pulled the finger back to the point where it could touch his wrist. At the same time, in order not to hear John's screams that sounded like a pig being slaughtered, Ryuto also considerately reduced the noise, that is, he used his other hand to choke the kid's neck. John instinctively wanted to shout under the severe pain, but the palm that was choking his neck immediately tightened, making him only whimper like a chicken. "From now on, you answer whatever I ask, otherwise you have to accept the test given to you by God, do you understand?" After breaking a living person's finger like breaking chopsticks, Ryuto's face even showed a happy smile, and his attitude was so calm that it made people shiver. In addition to Ryuto, Narukai and the male puppet who were watching together were also unaffected, as if they had long been accustomed to this level of torture. After all, in the world of extreme Tao, this level of torture was simply a common occurrence, and this was just an introductory lesson. Ryuto choked John's throat hard for more than 10 seconds. He was very particular about the strength he used, just enough to make John unable to make a sound, but not suffocate to death. Huff. Huff huff huff. But when Ryuto let go of his hand, John's face was pale, and he was panting with sweat all over his head. The severe pain in his hand seemed to stimulate every nerve in his body. Ryuto's cold eyes and decisive actions made him understand that this extreme Tao young master was definitely not joking with him. "I'll die. If I don't cooperate, not only will I die, but I'll also die after being tortured to the point where I'd rather die." For John, who had everything since he was born, he naturally didn't want to die, especially in the hands of such a subhuman. Damn it. Now I have to cooperate with him. In short, I have to leave alive first. After thinking it through, Hardadef forcefully endured the pain and squeezed out a flattering smile on his face. He smiled bitterly and said, "Young Master Long Do, just ask whatever you want. I'll definitely tell you everything I know." "Very well, what is your purpose in pursuing Yun Yen? Who sent you?" "Huh?" Ryuto's first question was a bit strange, so much so that John couldn't help but be stunned. Generally speaking, the purpose of a man pursuing a woman should be mostly simple. It was nothing more than wanting to play billiards and get a hole in one shot. But under certain circumstances, some people may not pursue women for such ordinary reasons, such as John now. In John's countless attempts to pick up girls in the past, he only did it for the purpose of playing billiards. But coincidentally, his pursuit of Yun Yen this time was not so simple. Because a month ago, John met a Japanese man with the same title as him. That guy called himself Father John, and was the president of the Great Beauty Association. The two were congenial, so they quickly became good friends and often went out to drink and play together. At a dinner table, the president once said to John, "With your talent and military skills, it's too much of a waste for you to just be the young master of the Teddy group. You should find a way to make a big impact." "Oh. Then what do you suggest?" "Actually, there is a member in our association. She is the CEO's wife of the Tsukujiri group. You can start with her and take control of the group." CEO's wife? I'm not interested in old women, so forget it. I didn't ask you to seduce her. The CEO of the Tsukujiri Group has a daughter. She is 17 years old this year and is a great beauty. She should be to your liking. After hearing the president's words and looking at Union's photo, John thought for a second and nodded in agreement. What a joke. The Tsukujiri Group was such a large technology company, and there was also such a great beauty like Miss Tsukujiri. Who wouldn't want it? As a result, Hardadef purposely got close to Auntie Jinchin in the later gatherings, and finally found a chance to go to the Tsukujiri bungalow to get to know that Miss Tsukujiri. Unfortunately, everything was ruined by Long Do. Hardadef definitely didn't dare to tell Ryuto the whole story. After rolling his eyes, he revealed an unnatural smile and replied, "Young Master Ryuto, what are you talking about? When a man pursues a woman, she will naturally crack, crack." However, he didn't finish his sentence this time. This time, two crisp sounds rang out at the same time, accompanied by an even more intense pain. "Oh! Woo 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 woo." Just as John opened his mouth and screamed in pain, the man next to him cleverly picked up a rag and pressed it into his mouth. Other than soundproofing, the rag could also prevent this guy from biting his tongue because of the pain. If that happened, he would have to put on a band-aid for him, which was very expensive. Was this person an idiot? How dare you tell me such an obvious lie? Looking at John's figure twitching crazily in pain, Ryuto couldn't help but shake his head. In terms of lying, Ryuto was an expert. If he could be deceived by such an idiot, it would be too ridiculous, so he didn't hesitate to break two of John's fingers. He actually dared to lie to me, which means that the fear I gave him is still not enough. It's quite boring to keep breaking fingers. It's time to use the next trick. At this time, Ryuto looked at Narukai, who was busy in this dim basement not far away, and asked at the same time, "Narukai, is the pot hot?" "Oh, okay." Narukai also turned his head and glanced at Ryuto, then he turned off the small gas stove in front of him and brought over a small pot that was boiling hot. Chapter 2:11. This small pot looked like a snow pan that was usually used for cooking. Inside it was half a pot of boiling oil, and it was black kerosene. When Ming Hai brought the pot of boiling kerosene to Hardadef, the scorching heat made his eyes burn. Even the intense pain in his fingers was suppressed for a moment. It could be seen how exaggerated it was. This is. After seeing the pot of boiling kerosene, John's body trembled violently because he already knew what the oil was used for. Although the fully heated kerosene didn't look very eye-catching, its temperature could exceed 300 degrees. It was much hotter than peanut oil and rapeseed oil. Pouring boiling kerosene on one's body was a classic of the polar world, man's bath. Long Do seemed to have felt John's fear from the bottom of his heart. He casually pressed John's head, pushing his handsome protagonist face less than a finger away from the pot. "I'll ask you one last time. What is your purpose in pursuing Yunyen? Who sent you?" Ryuto's words were still so calm. He didn't even tell John what the consequences would be if he lied again. Although everything was self-evident, under this situation, no one would have thought of the consequences. "No. You won't do this. This isn't human. Doing this kind of thing. You will be punished by God. You will go to hell." As if he was scared silly by the pot of oil in front of him, John trembled violently while he shouted incoherently. To be honest, when she heard this scumbag, who had ruined who knew how many girls and even killed a few of them, say the words, "will go to hell," she was shocked. Ryuto couldn't help but sigh. The thickness of a human skin could reach such a level. When you do something bad, you just silently pray for God's forgiveness. When others do something bad, you ask God to punish them to hell. Mothef ****, is God your family security guard? This is too shameless. So Ryuto sneered, "If God really exists, then he should beg for my forgiveness. Beg me to forgive him for creating a group of human garbage that does evil in the name of God. Do you understand? You dare. You dare to disrespect God. You, hiss. Just as Hardadef was about to reprimand this subhuman, Ming-Hai picked up a spoon and shook a spoonful of boiling oil onto Hardadef's face. Hardadef's body was immediately scalded by the oil. "Are you an idiot?" Seeing this foreigner trying to scare his boss with some righteous words, John couldn't help but laugh. Ming-Hai couldn't help but mock. "Who do you think you're talking to? We are Extreme Tao. You are talking about God with Extreme Tao? Is there a problem here?" While mocking, Narukai extended a finger and poked John's forehead as if he was poking an elementary school student who made a mistake. Long Do added, "I'll give you 3 seconds to organize your thoughts. If I don't hear a satisfactory answer by the end of the countdown, you'll know how it feels to be thrown into the pot to make tempura." When he heard this, John's eyes suddenly widened. The intense burning pain after the hot kerosene came into contact with his face was endless, and this was only the result of a small spoonful of oil. If his entire head was pressed into the oil, it would be easier to just die. However, John knew that if he didn't speak, this young man would do it without hesitation. Madman, madman, madman. It's over. This Extreme Tao young master is a madman. His brain is definitely not normal. Before John finished cursing in his mind, Ryuto had already begun to count down coldly. 3, 2. I'll talk. I'll talk. It's the president of the Great Beauty Association, who asked me to come. He asked me to seize the family business of the Tsukujiri Group. It's the whole plan he arranged. I'm just assisting in the implementation. It seemed that the terrifying atmosphere destroyed his last psychological defense, and John finally couldn't help but burst out everything he knew. The president of the Great Beauty Association? Tsukujiri? The moment he heard this sentence, Ryuto couldn't help but widen his eyes slightly, and his eyes exuded a strong murderous intent. Ryuto was too familiar with this name. After all, he had a night of intimate contact with his son Tsukujiri. It was so intimate that he was sent to the hospital, and he was almost killed by his sister Tsukujiri. In fact, Color Glaze had already suspected that John had some special collusion with the Great Beauty Association. It was just that she didn't expect the whole plan to be led by the Great Beauty Association behind the scenes, and John was just a tool responsible for implementing it. In the original work of Red Photo Album 2, No One Survived, the plot did not mention this part. Or in the plot, the Great Beauty Association and Tsukujiri's family didn't mention it at all. The reason why John pursued Yun Yen was only on the surface that he coveted her beauty. But the plot of the game was the plot of the game after all. Those plots could only show some parts related to the protagonist. As for the parts that weren't obviously related to the protagonist, there was no mention at all. In the world of the game, the player was just an ordinary high school student. The things that high school students could come into contact with and the scope of life were very small, so it was naturally impossible for them to completely understand the world. From Ryuto's understanding until now, the depth of the plot that could be known through the game was about 1/10 of the real depth of the world, or even 1%. For example, the most ancient society, Yatsuki, that Colored Glaze mentioned before didn't have a trace at all in the game. This time, the Great Beauty Association and John's conspiracy were the same. Although John was executed at the end of the plot, his conspiracy with the Great Beauty Association wasn't exposed. Instead, he was imprisoned because of the dirty things he did in private. In other words, even if Ryuto knew the situation of most of the enemies in the game, he couldn't see through everything in the real world. He still had to collect more information. Just as Ryuto was thinking, John couldn't help but yell, "I really only know this. Let me go. Or do you want money? I can give you any amount." This time, John was telling the truth. He really didn't know anything else. The marks caused by the kerosene splashed on his face burned with pain. The part of his palm that had 3 fingers broken on his back was even more painful. Now, John didn't want to think about anything else. He just wanted to leave here and see a doctor, no matter the cost. However, after hearing John's words, Ryuto first raised his eyebrows, then asked kindly, "Oh, if you have money, you should have said so earlier. I forgot that you are a rich young master. There must be a lot of money in your card, right?" I have 10 million in my card at any time. This money should be enough to redeem yourself. 10 million? So poor. That's too little, asshole. Are you trying to get rid of a beggar? No, it's really not little. I have 10 million US dollars, USD. What? USD? 10 million US dollars? When he heard that John could transfer such a large amount of money at any time, Ryuto couldn't help but let out a woe sound. Indeed, although 10 million US dollars didn't sound like a large amount, it was an astronomical number compared to yen. According to the current exchange rate, 1 USD was almost equivalent to 111 yen. 10 million US dollars was 1 billion yen. This was more valuable than Ryuto and Dunya's heads at that time. It was just that although this money was very tempting, it couldn't be taken away casually. After all, after this, the Teddy group would definitely know that the young master was missing. At that time, as long as they investigated the account, they would know that such a large amount of money was missing. This was bound to be a powerful search clue. So if he wanted to take this money, it was definitely impossible to transfer it directly. He had to use some financial means to launder it a few times before it could enter the account. It was impossible for ordinary people to launder this kind of money, but fortunately, Ryuto had a financial master-level subordinate here. Escort, go and call Gao Yuan over. Yes. With Ryuto's order, the escort immediately ran out of the basement and invited Gao Yuan over not long after. At the same time, Gao Yuan also held 2 laptops in his hands. Obviously, he had already understood the situation here. Under Gao Yuan's gaze, John tremblingly transferred the money through the two-way operation of the computer and mobile phone to an account in an unknown foreign country. As the prompt on the computer screen changed to "Transfer successful," this special transfer was completed. How is it? Is it done? Well, I will transfer this money to different accounts in batches, and then let it go around the world through some operations. In this way, no one will be able to detect the source when it is used again. How long will it take? The first batch can be solved in 3 days at the earliest. At that time, the amount of money will become yen, about 300 million. For this kind of financial operation, Gao Yuan was an expert. It was only a matter of time to launder this money. And the most important thing was that he could do it to the extent that even the professional organization of the Metropolitan Police Department couldn't find out the ins and outs. He could guarantee that the money could be used at will without leaving any trouble. Very good. Suddenly, Ryuto nodded with satisfaction and walked over to personally help John up from the chair. After the rope on his body was untied, John was so happy that tears almost flowed down. Island country little bastard, you dare to treat me like this. When I go back, I must spend a lot of money to hire someone to burn you to ashes. Although he thought so in his heart, John still smiled at Ryuto with joy. Can you let me go now? Yeah. Take care. I won't see you out. Gotcha. Before he finished speaking, a fistful of force hit John's face directly, and his neck was directly hit by a 180-degree rotation. Chapter 212. Huh. Strange. Why can I see my back? When Ryuto punched his neck until it rotated 180 degrees, Hardadef didn't realize what happened. In a person's life, if they didn't rely on a mirror, how could they see their own back? This wonderful experience was Ryuto's last gift to Hardadef, and it was also a gift to send him to the afterlife. Although he got the money, Hardadef definitely couldn't be let go. Ryuto wasn't a fool. He clearly knew that if he let this guy go, there would be endless trouble. This foreign devil would definitely use all kinds of methods to retaliate. If you cut the grass without removing the roots, you'll see who's the one behind. What's more, from the moment Hardadef planned to pursue Yunyen and seize the Tsukumori group, Ryuto had already sentenced this idiot to death. After killing Hardadef with one punch, Ryuto took out a handkerchief and wiped his fist, then stuffed the handkerchief into the idiot's mouth. Narukai, Manta, take this thing out and deal with it. Don't leave any traces. Yes. I promise to complete the task. When they heard Ryuto's order, the two men familiarly took out a big sack, put Hardadef's body in it, and carried it out of the basement. In terms of dealing with corpses, Kyoto was an expert among experts. If they wanted to, they could make people evaporate into thin air, and in the end, not a single hair could be found. As for how they did it, it was not convenient to elaborate. It's over? When Ryuto walked out of the basement of the Rulon Group headquarters, Colored Glaze, who had been waiting outside, greeted him. Aha! Just as you thought, the Great Beauty Association is behind this. Their purpose is to seize the Tsukimori Group. Sure enough, I said there's no such coincidence in the world. Colored Glaze sighed and followed Ryuto to the bedroom. To be honest, Ryuto wasn't used to taking a stroll with Colored Glaze in his courtyard in the middle of the night. It was as if the two of them had already started living together. However, just because Ryuto wasn't used to it didn't mean that Colored Glaze wasn't. After moving in, she found that she actually liked the atmosphere of the Rulon Group headquarters. Every day, there were many ghetto walking around, drinking, singing, and playing dice in each room. It felt like a big family, a big and lively family. Although most of the people in this family were gangsters in the eyes of society, Colored Glaze still felt that this group of villains was more honest than the hypocrites of the upper class. Of course, although Colored Glaze didn't say it out loud, she also felt that it was quite pleasant to be with Ryuto. Under the elegant moonlight, the two walked side by side in the wooden corridor, their light footsteps slowly moving forward. As they walked, Colored Glaze suddenly asked, "Actually, the main reason why you're so insistent on killing Hardadef is that you can't stand him pursuing Yunyen, right?" "You can say that." Ryuto nodded, not intending to hide his feelings. From an objective point of view, Hardadef was indeed an evil person and deserved to die. But even if he wasn't an evil person, Ryuto might still make a move on him, just not to the extent of being ruthless. After all, senior sister Yunyen was Long Do's girlfriend. If they wanted to steal his girlfriend, they would be enemies from head to toe. In the world of Ghetto, there were many ways to deal with the enemy, but there was only one goal, and that was to make the enemy disappear from this world. After hearing Ryuto's unhesitant answer, Colored Glaze was stunned for a moment, then slowly asked, "Then if someone wants to pursue me?" Before Colored Glaze could finish her sentence, Ryuto interrupted, "Then he can reserve a place in the crematorium." "Even Jesus can't save him, I said so." As he spoke, Ryuto gently held the hand next to him. The tender little hand that was grasped by his slightly rough hand struggled for a moment, and then she pretended to be reluctant and held back. Why are you so overbearing?" "Because I want the best things, so I didn't waste my time in this world." Ryuto's words actually hid another meaning, but Colored Glaze definitely didn't understand it. As they walked, the two came to Ryuto's room, or Colored Glaze's room door. However, when they came to the door of the room, they found that the light in the room was on. It was normal to turn on the light in a room at night. But the problem was, Colored Glaze and Ryuto were not inside, so why was the light turned on? "Is there someone in the room? Is it Dancing Costume? She should be helping me tidy up the room or something." "No. This smell is..." Just when Colored Glaze thought it was Dancing Costume helping her tidy up the room, her delicate nose suddenly twitched as if she smelled a familiar fragrance. "Smell. Sniff. Huh. This isn't it. Voila." Colored Glaze and Ryuto both smelled this familiar fragrance, and the door in front of the room suddenly opened from the inside. A beautiful woman in a delicate kimono appeared in front of the two. "Why are you standing outside? Come in quickly." At this time, Rue Hui waved to Colored Glaze and Ryuto and said with a smile, "Am I seeing things?" After seeing the familiar figure, Colored Glaze couldn't help but reach out and pinch Ryuto's thigh. She found that her fingers were a little painful, then she realized that it wasn't a dream. Rue Hui actually appeared at the Rulon Group headquarters in the middle of the night? And she was waiting for them in Colored Glaze's room? Because this scene was too surreal, the two didn't know how to react in a short time, so they could only walk into the room in a daze. After entering, Ryuto stood like a primary school student, while Colored Glaze swallowed a mouthful of saliva and asked, "Mother." "Ahem, mother, don't tell me you're here." "Don't worry, I'm not here to take you back. Since you like to live here, then stay. It just so happens that you can enrich your life experience. After Rue Hui entered the room, she sat on Colored Glaze's bed, and this bed belonged to Ryuto a day ago. Generally speaking, it was normal for a mother to worry about her daughter who ran away from home and come to see if she was doing well. But this seemed so strange when it came to Rue Hui. It was hard to believe that she deliberately came here because of this. So Colored Glaze replied without hesitation, "Did something happen? And it's an emergency related to Ryuto?" "Oh, it's not easy. You can still think calmly in this situation. It seems that your mind is much clearer." "Oh." After being ridiculed by her mother, Colored Glaze's little face slightly blushed. Indeed, if the previous Colored Glaze encountered this kind of mother's sudden inspection situation, she would probably be upset and her mind would be in a mess. But now she was not. She could even immediately infer the reason behind Rue Hui's appearance. It can be said that she was already a qualified military advisor. Seemingly gratified by her daughter's growth, Rue Hui couldn't help but reach out and touch Colored Glaze's little head. Then she turned her head and said to Ryuto, "In fact, this time I came here, in addition to wanting to see how Colored Glaze's living environment is, there is also an important matter to discuss with you." "Madam Rue Hui, there's no harm in saying it." "Well, Colored Glaze, what's the date in a week? Do you still remember?" "A week later?" When suddenly asked by her mother, Colored Glaze thought for a second, then quickly replied, "Is it Princess Fukudaheim's coming-of-age ceremony?" "Yes. The princess is about to turn 20 years old. According to the tradition, she needs to go through the coming-of-age ceremony and make her own crown according to the royal tradition." Hearing this, Ryuto couldn't help but ridicule, "What is a crown? A mere princess can wear a crown. Is this a rebellion?" Of course, in fact, the princess wearing a crown has been a tradition for hundreds of years. It is said that it originated from the era of the Emperor Sandwich at the beginning of the Westernization movement. It has nothing to do with rebellion. At that time, the Empress was the first empress to wear a Western dress, so from then on, there was a tradition of custom-made crowns. When the princesses came of age, they would wear a dress and a crown specially made for them by the royal silver shop, Ginza Wako. It is said that the more valued the princess, the higher the cost of making the crown, the more gorgeous the style, and the more pearls and other jewels inlaid on it. And according to the royal rules, Princess Fukudaheim must go to the imperial palace alone on the day of the ceremony to report to her grandparents, the former emperor, that she has become an adult and can take charge of the palace. After that, there will be a grand opening banquet. At that time, the emperor's family will also be there to greet the invited guests and celebrate. Lioli naturally knew this ancient tradition very well. However, there was one thing she didn't understand. What did this have to do with the dragon battle? After asking this question, Rue Hui first smiled faintly, then smiled and said, "Good question. According to my sources, the guests invited to Fukudaheim's coming-of-age ceremony are a bit special." Colored Glaze heard this and asked in confusion, "Special guests? Aren't they the people of Yotsuki?" According to common sense, as the core organization that ruled this country, Yotsuki would naturally attend such a large-scale royal event. As the Dark Crow, Rue Hui would definitely go. However, Rue Hui glanced at Ryuto and smiled, "The people of Yotsuki will definitely go, but the problem is that in the list of people invited, there are the leaders of the three extreme organizations Rulong Group, Big Dipper Alliance, and Black Snake Alliance." Hearing Rue Hui's words, Ryuto and Colored Glaze couldn't help but look at each other and see the surprise in each other's eyes. Chapter 213. The leader of the Rulong Group, Ryuto Kiryu. The leader of the Big Dipper Alliance, Kai Yang. The leader of the Black Snake Alliance, Tessa. In today's Tokyo underground world, these three are famous big shots. After all, not long ago, the Rulong Group, the Big Dipper Alliance, and the Black Snake Alliance announced the formation of a new alliance called the Black Hand Alliance. Before the alliance was formed, they even killed the leaders of the other two Extreme Do, the White Tiger Gang and the Psychedelic Saburo. They swallowed the territories and resources of those two groups, and now they were in the limelight. But even so, Extreme Do was still Extreme Do. No matter how famous he was still not a decent person. He should not have been invited to such a grand event held by the imperial family. So Ryuto was confused. He scratched his head and asked, "Is there something wrong with their heads? Why did they invite us extreme bosses? To cause trouble?" From Ryuto's point of view, only those who wanted to cause trouble would invite extreme to a grand event. Otherwise, there was no reason. But Colored Glaze shook her head. Exactly the opposite. I feel that this invitation is full of evil intentions. It should be the decision of that woman, Minato-ya. There were not many people who could make the decision for an invitation of this level. As for Ryuto, Kai Yang, and Tessa, only Empress Wu De would be involved. After all, not long ago, the three of them had formed the Black Hand Alliance and killed Empress Wu De's Hero Alliance, while it was still in its infancy. They had also eliminated 2 of her capable subordinates and 2 whole forces. According to Colored Glaze's statistics, Minato-ya's direct and indirect losses were at least tens of billions of yen. It could be said that it was a feud on the level of killing her father. With this level of hatred, the Empress would naturally not laugh it off. She would find all kinds of opportunities to take revenge. Therefore, from Colored Glaze's point of view, this sudden invitation was probably Xiao He and Tian Ya's carefully planned revenge. But the problem was, what could they do by inviting 3 leaders of hostile organizations to the royal princess's coming-of-age ceremony? Demonstrate? Or, no, the main problem was that Ryuto and the others couldn't possibly go there, right? Since they already knew that the royal family was behind the Ranxia Alliance, how could the 3 leaders of the Black Hand Alliance go to the royal family's headquarters? Not to mention the cautious Kai Yang and Tessa, even the daring Long Do wouldn't dare to participate in this kind of banquet that was obviously a trap. Unless the other side used some kind of threat to force them to attend the princess's coming-of-age ceremony. In fact, Rue Hui and Colored Glaze had thought of this as well. However, they didn't know what Xiao and Tianya were going to use to threaten Ryuto. But there was nothing to be anxious about. They would just have to deal with whatever came their way. No matter how anxious they were, it wouldn't help at this moment. After discussing the general situation, Rue Hui stood up from the bed and prepared to leave. But before leaving, she deliberately looked at Ryuto and said with a smile, "I don't oppose Colored Glaze temporarily staying here, but there are some things that can't be done, understand?" This. Of course. After being reminded by Rue Hui, Ryuto's expression was somewhat awkward, but he still seriously promised. Obviously, the thing that Rue Hui said couldn't be done was the last C in the ABC of love, which was sleeping together. A man and a woman living under the same roof, and both of them were very young. They were at the age where they were hot-blooded and had a strong curiosity about the opposite sex. In Rue Hui's view, this situation was still a bit dangerous because Colored Glaze still couldn't lose her virginity. It was her last life-saving charm. Rue Hui was very clear about what Ryuto wanted to do, and she would try her best to help, but the Yatsuki was too powerful. Unless they had the strength to overthrow the country, it was difficult to compete with them. Therefore, the best solution in Rue Hui's mind was to let Colored Glaze go to the Tenzai Shrine for a period of time as the fasting king. When she came out, she would reunite with Ryuto. This way, there wouldn't be any problems. Although he had given up 20 years of his youth, at the very least, he would be able to preserve his life and not lose it. In order to achieve this, the bottom line was that Lioli had to be a fair and flawless young girl. After all, before becoming the fasting king, the successor had to go through a thorough body examination. Whether she had been intimate with a man or not would be known. In so many years of history, there had been Komiyoshi girls who had been in trouble. According to what Rue Hui knew, several ancestors who were discovered to be virgins before entering the heavenly abode divine palace were all cruelly treated in the end. They were directly captured and burned to ashes. As Colored Glaze's mother, Rue Hui naturally didn't want her to be treated so cruelly. Therefore, it was necessary to protect Colored Glaze's bottom line as the fasting king. Therefore, she specially came to warn Ryuto that kissing and hugging was fine, but he mustn't push Colored Glaze down. Otherwise, there would be no turning back. Of course, Colored Glaze snorted at this attitude. When sending Rue Hui off quietly, Colored Glaze didn't say a word. Her brows were slightly furrowed, obviously in a bad mood. What's wrong? Weren't you happy just now? Why does your face look so bad now? On the way back to the room, Ryuto looked at Colored Glaze's unhappy face and couldn't help but laugh. Aren't you very smart? Guess what I'm thinking? Colored Glaze snorted coldly, and at the same time, she couldn't help but reach out and rub the corner of her skirt. You're bothered by what Mrs. Rue Hui said just now, right? After all, it was normal for a teenage girl like Colored Glaze to be unhappy when she was mentioned in front of her mother. At least, Ryuto thought so. But in fact, the reason why Colored Glaze was unhappy was because of this, but it wasn't the whole reason. Mom said that for my own good. I don't dislike her advice. She then smiled bitterly. The reason why I'm unhappy is that I always feel like my body isn't mine. I don't even have the right to decide when I want to be with someone. Colored Glaze was naturally very clear about Rue Hui's previous reminder. As long as she didn't have a relationship with Ryuto, she could always go back to being a fast king. But this feeling made Colored Glaze feel very uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. She always felt that her purity had become her last life-saving charm. She would rather not have this life-saving charm. It was simply disgusting. After feeling Colored Glaze's dilemma, Ryuto couldn't help but approach her and say in her ear, "Oh, so you want to do that with me so much? You're really bold, even I didn't think about this kind of thing." The moment Ryuto said this, Colored Glaze's face suddenly turned red. She suddenly realized that her words just now seemed to have some elements of grievance because she couldn't be intimate with someone. It made Lioli seem like she really wanted to do that with someone, just like a woman who couldn't satisfy her desires. Wait. What the hell did I just say? How can I say this in front of this stinky pervert? Especially after thinking about what kind of situation the intimacy in her words represented, Colored Glaze's face suddenly turned red. The sudden kiss last night already made her unable to stop. She felt as if her whole body had been electrocuted. If I were to jump directly from A to BC, how would that feel? If you asked Colored Glaze if she wasn't curious, she was definitely a little curious. After all, young people all wanted to know how fascinating the legendary making a child was. But unlike the carnivorous Yun Yen, Colored Glaze was still a herbivorous woman. In this regard, she was much more shy than Yun Yen. When she thought about the possibility of playing pool with Ryuto in the future and getting a hole-in-one, she felt so shy that she wanted to die. So until they returned to the bedroom, Colored Glaze didn't dare to say a word to Ryuto. Her little face was bright red the whole time. For such a cute Colored Glaze, Ryuto naturally stopped admiring and didn't continue to tease her. After all, this young mistress was still a tsundere by nature. Who knew if she would be too shy and slap you instead? After slapping you and your hand hurt, you would still have to jump around and curse. That would be boring. At this time, Ryuto very gentlemanly sent Colored Glaze back to the bedroom and then went back to his own guest room. After tonight's kidnapping, interrogation, earning money, mother-in-law's visit, wife's tsundere, and so on, it was already late and about time to rest. During this time, Ryuto basically didn't go out to rob those stinky hooligans at night. Instead, he would obediently sleep at home. On the one hand, now all the punks in Tokyo had learned their lesson. They all knew that there was a bastard extorting at night, so they didn't dare to go out at night in the streets and alleys. On the other hand, Ryuto caused the royal family insult incident. Now the entire Tokyo police was still searching for the black-shirt man's trace. There was no need to go out to earn money at this time. However, not long after Ryuto laid down, he was thinking about the recent events in his mind. Suddenly, a strange chi enveloped the entire guest room. The speed of this chi was so fast that it was like a huge wave coming head-on. Almost in the next second, Ryuto and the entire room were shrouded in it, making him feel like he was under the guillotine. He could lose his life at any time. Most of the martial artists who practiced martial arts to the peak could condense their own momentum. Ryuto had already experienced it. Very coincidentally, this time he suddenly felt this sharp momentum in the middle of the night. It was obviously from the same person that Ryuto felt last time. That kind of pressure made people feel like they were being pinched by a sharp knife on their neck. Ryuto would never forget it in his life. It's him? That guy. Is he looking for me for revenge? After feeling this familiar chi, Ryuto quickly got up from the bed, quickly opened the window and jumped up. Like a dexterous monkey, he quickly flipped to the top of the guest room. Under the night's cold wind and moonlight, a small figure was already waiting here. The gaze that shot out from the eyes of the iron mask was even sharper than the edge of a blade. Chapter 2:14. At this time, standing on the roof of the guest room, and exuding a murderous aura, was a very short man. He wore an iron mask that covered his entire face, and his limbs were much shorter than normal people. It was obvious that he suffered from some natural disease. But even so, this man didn't give off the feeling of being weak at all. Instead, he had the aura of a 2-meter-tall giant. It was hard to imagine that there would be a man with such a strong aura in the world. It was also hard to imagine that the gaze from behind the iron mask would be so vicious. It was obvious that this man didn't come to Ryuto's roof in the middle of the night on a whim, but he came prepared. Ryuto knew this man, and this man also knew Ryuto. After all, in their last encounter, he left an unforgettable memory for this man. At that time, Ryuto exploded with his strongest attack and directly hit this man's face. Even the current Long Do could easily recall the crisp feeling of his bones exploding with a single punch. For this man, it was an unforgettable scene for him. Long time no see, Sai-tu. After slightly raising his eyebrows, Ryuto said the man's name. Demon Child, Sai-tu, a top martial arts master, and also the headquarter teacher of the Sai-tu Guild. In other words, Sai-tu was once the headquarter teacher of the Sai-tu Guild. Because after experiencing the Dunya kidnapping incident, he was forced to enter the Dao and walk the Jianghu. After all, he colluded with the former Sai-tu Guild elder house Fujiin Mori, who committed suicide for fear of punishment, and the latter colluded with Tenmu Ayam and tried to murder the current president, Wu Hong, so he must be a member of the traitors. Apart from this, Enter the Dojo had also provoked Rui, the head of the Kanzaki family, in the Tokyo Emperor Hotel. In fact, Enter the Dojo had even directly attacked Rui. It would be strange if Rui could avoid him. As time went by, Wu Hong regained consciousness and began to investigate the mole in his family. Naturally, it was impossible for the person who had entered the Dao to remain unscathed. He was one of the main targets of the investigation. According to Ryuto's knowledge, after Sai-tu entered the Dao, he should have directly killed several students and police officers who went to the hospital to ask him to assist in the investigation. Then, he disappeared in the alleys of Tokyo, and there was no trace of him. From a certain point of view, Sata's life was already over. What awaited him next was an endless pursuit. Logically speaking, Sai-tu Endo was a martial arts maniac after all. He wasn't very good at escaping, so the Sai-tu Guild Hall should be able to find him easily. As long as he could find this guy, even if he was a rare martial arts master, he would die without a doubt. After all, even though entering the Dao was strong, there were still many powerful martial artists in the Sai-tu Guild Hall. With the help of 3 to 5 top experts and some modern weapons, it was not very difficult to kill this demon child. But in fact, until now, no one had seen the trace of Sai-tu Endo, not even a strand of hair could be found. From this point of view, Wu Hong inferred that he might have smuggled out of the country. Only in this way could he disappear so completely. However, judging from the figure now, the possibility of Sai-tu Endo being smuggled out of the country had been completely ruled out. He had actually been hiding in Tokyo, but perhaps he was living under the protection of someone. However, at this time, Sai-tu Endo came to Ryuto in the middle of the night. Naturally, it was not to tell him that he was still alive. Boom! The next second, accompanied by a strong gust of wind, this seemingly small man suddenly made his move. The moment he took a step forward, the bricks and tiles on the roof of the room immediately cracked on the spot. Crackling sounds could be heard from the explosion. At the same time, Saito Endo's entire appearance changed. His body, which originally looked like a dwarf, seemed to be inflated, and the black night clothes on his body were torn by his muscles. Explosive power also gushed out of his body. Saito Endo had spent his life learning martial arts, practicing countless martial arts, and a series of hard martial arts with tantric qigong as the core. He was quite accomplished in the study of qi. Therefore, the moment he made his move, Ryuto could only feel a terrifying sense of oppression, a sense of oppression like a vast mountain. Furthermore, the speed at which he entered the Dao was extremely fast. He merely arched his body and shot toward Long Do like an arrow that had just left the bow. At the same time, his left and right fists punched up and down, as if one punch could break the sky and the other could crack the earth. They went straight for Ryuto's head and lower abdomen. 2 punches were thrown at the same time. As long as one of them was hit, it would be a tragic end. So fast. But he could barely see it. Compared to the time when he fought Saito Endo in the Tokyo Emperor Hotel, the current Ryuto was much stronger, especially in terms of actual combat experience. So he also pulled his bow up and down. His left elbow blasted up and his right knee pushed down, blocking the 2 fatal attacks at the same time. Bang! When the fists, elbows, and knees of the 2 sides collided, it made a terrifying explosion. According to the current situation, Saito Endo and Ryuto's physical ability were on par. If it was just a competition of strength, it would be difficult to determine the winner. However, if Saito Endo was the type of person who relied on strength to survive, he was not worthy of the title of martial Dao master. Humph! Saito Endo let out a cold snort, and a strange force burst out from 0 distance. The second time, it blasted toward Ryuto's elbows and knees from the 2 fists that were blocked. What? At this moment, Ryuto only felt numbness in his elbows and knees, and his body immediately lost balance. Stinking brat! Martial arts is not as simple as you think. Just at the moment when Ryuto lost his balance, a palm the size of a cattail leaf fan had already gently pressed on his chest. It was not a very strong punch, but it seemed to be gently pressing on his chest. It did not look like an attack at all. However, just as the large hand that had entered the Dao pressed on Long Do's chest, a powerful hidden force that was even stronger than the impact of a hammer was transmitted into his body. When his body was sent flying backward by this force, Ryuto could almost hear the bones in his chest screaming, and he could almost imagine the scene of his internal organs being squeezed and deformed by the huge impact. The huge pressure squeezed Ryuto's internal organs, making him almost breathless. Even though he had retreated 5 or 6 steps before stabilizing himself on the edge of the roof, the palm strike had caused him to break out in a cold sweat and gasp for breath. He felt as if a storm was raging in his chest. So strong. Is this the true strength of the demon child, Saito? That seemingly light slap had dealt unprecedented damage to Fighting Dragon. If it weren't for the fact that his body was tough enough and he had 2 defensive skills protecting him, he wouldn't have survived. Just a light slap would have been enough to kill him on the spot. What kind of terrifying lethality was that? Of course, in fact, Saito already had this level of strength when he entered the Dao. He was much stronger than Ryuto. Although the other half of his face was smashed by Ryuto in the Tokyo Emperor Hotel, and he changed from a half-iron mask to a full iron mask, it was not Ryuto's credit. If it was not for Cat House's rabbit ball throwing out long needles, Ryuto would not have been able to punch his face. He would have been killed by the demon child in the next second. What a guy! Was that the legendary Qigong? After barely suppressing the strong shock in his chest, Ryuto took a deep breath and looked at Saito, who was standing not far away. If it was 1-on-1, Ryuto would not be able to beat this guy. But even so, he was not afraid at all. After all, it was just a matter of a million. He could just ask a group of people to gang up on him. Humph, you don't even know this. Saito snorted in disdain and then sneered. In ancient times, this was called qi, or internal force. As long as you master qi, you can actively make your muscles vibrate to generate all kinds of force. Only this can be called martial arts. What you are doing is nothing more than child's play. Oh, there are so many things to pay attention to, I have learned something. Although they were enemies, after listening to Sato's explanation, Ryuto couldn't help but nod. This little brat. He really didn't know anything. Seeing Long Do's wide-eyed and enlightened expression, the Dao entrant really felt like he had nowhere to vent his anger. After all, the cultivation of qi was a necessary step in martial arts cultivation. Ryuto didn't know anything, which meant that he had not even started. However, it was this bastard who had not even entered the gate of martial arts and relied only on his tyrannical physical fitness and a little ancient eight-extremities fist to conquer the world. Yet, he had smashed the other half of the face of someone who had entered the gate of martial arts into pieces. This was truly absurd. Saito thought about how half of his face was smashed by Ryuto's collapsing fist. Even his bones were twisted beyond recognition. Sato's killing intent erupted again. But he couldn't kill him. Saito didn't come here to kill Ryuto, but to convey his master's invitation, not to kill him. In the worst stage of Sato's life, when he was about to be captured by the elites of Saito Guild and Kamiyoshi clan, it was his master who saved him, so he should repay him. Little brat, catch. Saito saw Saito took out an envelope from his arms, and then with a shake of his wrist, the soft envelope spun at high speed like a piece of iron and flew toward him. To be able to throw a soft envelope like a shuriken, this is obviously the effect of qi, which is not something that can be done by ordinary strength. It hurts. When Ryuto received the envelope, his hand was faintly painful, but when he immediately opened the envelope, his brows slightly wrinkled. In a week, please come to the princess's coming-of-age ceremony, or you will regret it for the rest of your life. There was only one sentence written on the short piece of paper, but the malice contained in it was obvious. Obviously, Saito didn't come here voluntarily. He was just a messenger who sent this malicious invitation letter to Ryuto. And the person who could drive this martial arts master to do this kind of work and help him hide until today was the queen of Wu-de, Kawataya. Chapter 215. So that's how it is. When Ryuto saw the signature on the envelope, he raised his head again and looked at Saito Ryuto, who was glaring at him not far away. He seemed to understand how this guy hid until now. Since the Dunya kidnapping incident, Saito Ryuto was wanted and hunted by many forces. With his rough personality, it was difficult for him to hide in Yoto. But until now, the various forces couldn't find his whereabouts. This either meant that the guy had escaped, or that a powerful force was protecting him. From the looks of it, the force that took the Devil Child under its command was the Great Beauty Association and the Japanese royal family that Kawata belonged to. This is troublesome. This time, even this guy can be recruited. From an objective point of view, Saito Ryuto could be said to be a rare martial Dao master in the world. His combat power could even be compared to a cat's house. What's more, this person was murderous and violent. Coupled with his extraordinary level of martial Dao, he was like a fully armed mad dog that could kill countless people at any time. Such a powerful mad dog was tamed by Kabato Masa, and he became the subordinate of the queen. It was really difficult to deal with. Kabato Masa already had a lot of forces in the light and in the dark. With the addition of Saito Ryuto, it was like adding wings to a tiger. It would definitely bring a lot of trouble to Ryuto. After throwing the letter in his hand, Saito Ryuto said sternly, "Ryuto Kiryu, keep your life for the time being. After you attend the Little Master's ceremony in a week, I will take your life. Wash your neck and wait." Whoosh. The next moment, Saito Ryuto's figure immediately jumped out of the roof of the second floor like a bolt of lightning and disappeared in the blink of an eye. In the eyes of the huge Rulon Group headquarters, this martial Dao master could come and go as he pleased. No one could stop him at all. A week later, huh? What a forceful way to invite him. Watching the figure of the martial Dao master disappear, Ryuto could not help but sigh slightly. Originally, he and Lioli had agreed not to attend the coming-of-age ceremony. After all, they were not familiar with Princess Fukudaji, and she looked as ugly as if she drank something strange when she grew up. Who would want to see a mutated woman in her 20s wearing a crown and swaggering around? However, from the letter that the Empress had specially sent over, It seemed that she was determined to make Ryuto attend. She was even willing to let Sai-tu enter the Tao to threaten him. Please come, or you will regret it for the rest of your life. This sentence sounded domineering, but in Ryuto's ears, it made him very angry. Good fellow, he actually threatened me to such an extent. Did he really think that I was a pushover and wouldn't dare to go? After looking at the invitation letter in his hand again, Ryuto casually squeezed it. With a fierce rub, the originally thick paper turned into little bits and scattered on the ground. Not good, not good, not good at all. Originally, Ryuto didn't want to go to Fukudaheim's coming-of-age ceremony, but after what Kawata and Sai-tu did, he really wanted to go. Although he didn't know what they were going to do at the coming-of-age ceremony, Ryuto suddenly wanted to teach them a lesson. Didn't you invite me over? Then I'll go, but if the place is smashed, it's your own fault. Thinking of this, Ryuto couldn't help but take a deep breath, and the expression on his face became very serious. Immediately afterward, he immediately went downstairs to change his clothes, woke up Narukai who was dozing off outside, then left the Rulon Group headquarters by car and went to another street, Ginza Mokom. After so many things happened, Ryuto definitely couldn't sleep tonight anyway. Since he couldn't sleep, he simply went to find an old acquaintance and asked the old acquaintance about the problem he was very concerned about. That is, the opening and use of ki. The battle just now, although it was very short. But it could be said that it was the most dangerous battle Ryuto had so far. In terms of physical fitness, Ryuto's physical fitness was equal to that of Access to Tao, and Ryuto's physical fitness was even stronger. But when the two of them fought, it quickly became a one-sided situation. The fundamental reason was that Access to Tao could control ki. In ancient times, this was indeed called internal strength, or ki. As long as you master ki, you can actively make your muscles tremble to generate various forces. Only this can be called martial arts. You're nothing more than a child playing house. When Ryuto was defeated, Access to Tao once said in a disdainful tone. His original intention, of course, was to ridicule Ryuto, but he probably didn't expect that it would suddenly arouse Ryuto's interest. In martial arts, there was a special technique called one-inch force, which could make a powerful blow in a very short distance. Although stored force was mysterious, it was, in essence, just a special technique of exerting force, not a cultivation method. But by mastering ki, making every muscle in the body tremble to generate various forces, this was no longer an ordinary force technique, it was really similar to the internal strength in martial arts dramas. After mastering it, the muscles in the body can begin to contract, twist, pull, and other movements from any angle, thus forming various forces. In other words, first master ki, then use ki to generate force. This was the mastery and use of ki. If the two sides were fighting normally, by controlling ki to make the muscles tremble to strengthen obvious force, it could greatly increase the power of the attack. If the two sides were fighting at a very close distance, they could directly use hidden force to deliver a fatal blow without distance, acceleration, or preparation. It was terrifying. If the enemy was preparing to attack, they could generate Dan force from the body. Even if the abdomen or the head were weak, they could still be used to break the enemy's arm. In simple terms, this was the reason Ryuto was defeated. He didn't know how to use ki, so he couldn't activate obvious force, hidden force, and Dan force. An enemy who couldn't control ki like this, in the eyes of Access to Tao, was stupid, or even not even worthy to be his opponent. Of course, until now, Ryuto didn't have any concept of ki, but fortunately, he knew that a person must have some understanding in this area. Not long after, in the Neon Ginza nightclub La Jump Bar, Ryuto found Furamaki Sotaro sitting in the corner drinking cheap wine, and told him his doubts. So that's how it is, burp. You want to ask me about ki? Then you found the right person. At this time, Furamaki had obviously drunk a lot, but when he heard his proud disciple's question about ki, he still answered in high spirits. As the master of Furamaki-style martial arts, although Furamaki Sotaro looked like an ordinary old man, he was still an ancient martial artist who had studied martial arts for decades. Naturally, he knew what ki was. According to Old Master Gu Mu, aura, wasn't some kind of magic, nor was it some kind of mystical ability. Instead, it was something that existed in every living being. In the mouth of modern scientists, they call Qi the human microelectromagnetic field. In the mouth of the ancient people, Qi was called internal force or internal force. But in essence, it was a way to completely unleash 100% of the body's potential. Speaking of this, Furamaki glanced at Ryuto's muscular body that was completely different from when they first met. Even from the perspective of a martial artist, Ryuto's current physical fitness was already quite strong. After all, LV4 physique brought an all-around increase that ordinary people couldn't achieve in their lifetime. But even so, Ryuto only had a very strong physique, and he didn't unleash the potential of this physique to the extreme. If LV4 physique had 100 points of combat power, then Ryuto could only unleash about 60 points at most, and the other 40 points were hidden in the use of Qi. The human body was originally an inexhaustible treasure house, and the hidden treasures were as vast as the Milky Way. After some special training, humans could grasp the power of Qi in their hands and unleash all the potential of the body. This was also the realm that the group of top martial artists in history could achieve. From the moment a martial artist can grasp Qi, the proficient realms of mastery are obvious strength, inward strength, Dan strength, and will strength. But I think these realms may be a bit far from you, so I haven't mentioned it. Speaking of this, the old man couldn't help but look at Ryuto. It seemed that he felt that it was still a bit too early for him to cultivate Qi. After all, the complexity of it was difficult to describe in words. According to Furamaki Sotaro's personal experience, it was already very difficult to master the most basic, obvious strength. Generally speaking, it was impossible to do without 10 or 20 years of hard work. And the inward strength and Dan strength, in addition to decades of hard work, it also required a considerable amount of talent. Otherwise, it was impossible to comprehend it in one's lifetime. As for the final willpower, it was basically a legendary level. It was said that a martial artist who had cultivated to this level would have a flawless temperament like a bright pearl. They would be able to predict danger and avoid calamities. They would be able to move at will and walk leisurely in a rain of bullets. Anyway, no one had seen it before, so they could brag as much as they wanted. But except for the will strength at the end, the bright strength, dark strength, and Dan strength were indeed real. Furamaki Sotaro could testify to this, because at his peak, he was a martial artist who practiced Dan strength. Suddenly, Ryuto smiled helplessly and said, "I can't help it. Who told me to fight with Saito Irido in the near future? If I don't know how to use Qi, it will be difficult for me to be his opponent." Bang! Originally, Ryuto just casually mentioned this name, but when he heard the words Saito Irido, Furamaki Sotaro couldn't help but clench his fist and crush the thick beer bottle in his hand with his bare hands. Chapter 216. Accompanied by a crisp shattering sound, the fragments of the beer bottle mixed with the aroma of malt scattered on the ground, and even slightly cut Furamaki Sotaro's palm. But he didn't care about it, but his face flashed with a dignified expression and anger from the bottom of his heart. At the same time, the old man who usually gave others the impression of a wanton and disco lover had his face darkened, revealing a solemn expression that was comparable to the title of Grand Master of Ancient Madras School. This is... Does the old man have a grudge against the path of initiation? Since knowing Furamaki Sotaro, this was the first time Ryuto saw the old man show such an expression. Obviously, the name Path of Initiation sounded very special in his ears. And there was another thing that surprised Ryuto. It was the strength of the old man's hand that crushed the beer bottle. Now Furamaki's physical ability was very poor, and his physique was only at the level of LV2. It was hard to imagine that his hand strength could crush a thick beer bottle. This was not a syrup used for acting, but a real beer bottle. It would be strange if this level of strength could crush it directly. Could it be that what happened just now was the actual use of Qi? Through muscle trembling, it could induce a stronger force? Just when Ryuto was surprised by the old man's Qi, the old man slowly raised his head and said to Ryuto in a deep voice, "You want to go against Sai too? That demon child?" That's what happened. Hearing this, the old man sighed deeply, then shook his head and said, "Forget it, you are not his opponent. Even I am not his opponent." After hearing this sentence, Ryuto understood that the old man had fought with Path of Initiation. Furthermore, it was obvious that this master of the ancient Mu school had been defeated by someone who had stepped into the Tao. In fact, he had even been beaten up quite badly. After that, the old man told Ryuto about his past. That was almost 10 years ago. At that time, although the old man loved to dance, he still managed his own Furamaki Ryu dojo well and passed down his skills to the next generation. But on that day, that demon child appeared. He came to provoke me, and I fought with him. In the end, I almost died on the spot. As Furamaki Sotaro spoke, he reached out and lifted the corner of his shirt, revealing the huge handprint on his abdomen. The deep purple handprint was left on the old man's body like a special tattoo. Even after 10 years, it was still as clear as new. It was clear how ruthless Seitu's palm was. The most important thing was that the Tao initiation was at the very center of the human body. It was located in the middle of the golden section line of the human body, which was the so-called Dantian. After cultivating Qi to a high level, one could use the Dantian to shake the body from the inside out and use the so-called Dan force. This was the realm that the old man had reached. But the Tao initiation directly destroyed almost all the muscles, meridians, and acupoints near the old man's Dantian, causing the Dan force that he had painstakingly cultivated for many years to vanish, and his strength plummeted. So that was it. It was that bastard's doing. Ryuto had always felt that the old man seemed to be injured. Now that he heard it, he knew that it was a gift left by Sai too. Suddenly, Ryuto could not help but clench his fist, and said in a tone that contained fire, "Old man, I will avenge you." Avenge? What avenge? The strength of the Tao initiation has already reached the peak of Dan force. You haven't even released your Qi. Fighting with him is not revenge, it's suicide. Do you understand? Then teach me how to release my Qi. As long as I learn, I have confidence that I can kill him. What nonsense. The old man heard this and couldn't help but blow his beard. He said disdainfully, "Even if I help you release your Qi now, it will take at least 10 years to cultivate to the point where you can use obvious force. How can it be useful in the near future? Do you think you are a god? Let me try. Maybe I really am an immortal?" Ryuto heard this and smiled slightly. There was a strange, unfathomable confidence in his tone. Of course, Ryuto was not a god, but his Krypton gold system was comparable to a god. If he remembered correctly, there were no skills related to Qi in the shop, but it was most likely because he did not release his Qi, and the system determined that there was no such thing. Just like when Ryuto did not learn the skill Furamaki-style martial arts at the beginning, if he did not have the corresponding skill, then the system would not open the purchase category of the skill. But if he really released his Qi, even if it was just a little bit, he could quickly buy the skill book to quickly let this ability reach the point where it could be used in actual combat. Soaring to the sky. But this kind of thing, the old man Furamaki naturally did not know. He only thought that Ryuto did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. But even so, the old man still could not persuade this stinky hooligan who was more clingy than candy, and could only help him release his Qi. Not long after, the two appeared in the back alley of the La Jump Bar nightclub. Compared to the last time when Ryuto chased the old man to the back alley, the group of junkies who usually gathered here had already disappeared. That was probably because the psychedelic Saburo group had been wiped out. Moreover, under the management of the Black Hand Alliance, the behavior of taking drugs in the middle of the night had decreased a lot. After all, Ryuto set a rule that if he saw a junkie, he would directly cut off their fingers with a knife and see how many fingers were left for them to suck. After arriving at a single room in the corner of the remote alley, the old man warned again, "I can help you release your Qi. After you experience it, you should understand the difference in strength between you and those who have entered the Tao. Don't think about revenge anymore, understand? Okay, I swear, if I don't train my strength to negative Jing, I will definitely not take revenge, okay? That's more like it. After hearing Ryuto's oath, the old man could not help but sigh in relief. After all, negative Jing required at least 20 years of training to be produced. This Ryuto was still far away. Maybe by that time he had entered the Tao, he would have already died of old age. So he waved his hand and said, "Take off your clothes, get ready to start." Take off my clothes? Here. Long Do looked around at the small, dark room and couldn't help but twitch his mouth. This small room should be where the old man usually stayed. It was not that he did not have the money to rent a better room, but it was closer to the nightclub, so it would be more convenient for him to go to the disco. But in the middle of the night, to let Ryuto take off his clothes here, it was more or less, "Just take off your clothes. I need to perform some acupuncture on your body to stimulate the acupuncture points and let the qi in your body start to become active. This way, you will be able to quickly feel the power." As he spoke, the old man took out a row of acupuncture needles from somewhere and walked over with the needles held up like Granny Rong. Phew. You should have said so earlier, it's just acupuncture. After understanding the old man's meaning, Ryuto also took off his clothes and looked at the needles piercing into the acupuncture points on his body. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. When the needles pierced into the acupuncture points, it felt soft and numb. It was not painful, but even a little comfortable. From the way the old man inserted the needles, he probably learned acupuncture from an ancient country. Coincidentally, the world's top expert, Maoya, also knew how to use needles. Acupuncture techniques were closely related to the acupuncture points, and the acupuncture points were closely related to qi. Looking at it this way, the reason why Rabbit Ball was so strong should be related to his good use of needles and his deep understanding of the acupuncture points in the human body. After all, he should be able to stimulate any acupuncture point in the body at will, thus creating a strong qi in the body. However, after Ryuto's acupuncture points were densely packed with needles, the old man Furamaki's next step shocked him. After the acupuncture points were fixed, the old man started to clip small copper wires onto the hooks at the end of the long needles. The other end of the copper wires was connected to something like a generator. It felt like he was planning to give Ryuto a pleasant electric shock therapy. That, Teacher Furamaki, to activate qi, the fastest way is to use a small electric current to stimulate the acupuncture points, so your body will feel a little numb in a while. That's normal. There won't be a problem, right? Ryuto heard this and swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He felt that his scalp was starting to numb. He felt like he was a death row prisoner sitting in the electric chair, and he was the kind that stupidly sent himself to the door. Of course there won't be a problem. As long as the position of the electric needles is correct, it should be successful. Of course, this is a test of the user's memory. Then your memory. No problem. Although I'm already 67 years old, my memory is still very good. When asked this question, Furamaki Sotaro patted his chest and promised with a face full of confidence. However, Ryuto's rogue analyzer could clearly see that the old man's attributes showed that he was 69 years old. Very good memory? Wait a minute. Didn't you forget how old you were? Instantly, Ryuto felt a chill down his spine and quickly asked, "Wait, actually, is there any other way to activate qi? Don't talk, let's start, or you'll bite your tongue." Without waiting for Ryuto to hesitate for a while, the old man had already pulled down the switch very quickly. Almost at that moment, Long Do felt as if his head had been pierced by a bolt of lightning. His eyes were pale white, and there were constantly snowflakes like old TV shows flashing crazily. This is the legendary electric shock therapy? When the electric current entered Ryuto's body, he wanted to move, but he couldn't even move a finger, and his body was even slightly trembling. But under such circumstances, Long Do felt that some parts of his body were moving with a fluid that he couldn't touch or see, but he could clearly feel its existence. Chapter 217. This flowing thing was like a stream of water, spreading from the various acupuncture points all over his body. It was particularly obvious in the current situation where his body was numb. Obviously, this was the mysterious power called Qi that Furamaki mentioned before. Qi was attached to his body like a cloud, as if the blood in his body also flowed with the flow of Qi and mixed with it. Qi and blood. In many ancient Qigong theories, Qi and blood were inseparable. Previously, it was difficult for Dragon Fight to understand this concept, but now he had a rough idea of what it meant. Hiss. Just as Ryuto felt the movement of Qi and blood, Furamaki also turned off the switch and released Ryuto from Professor Yang's kiss. Looking at Ryuto's thoughtful expression, the old man also smiled and asked, "How is it? You probably understand now, right?" "I understand, but it's difficult to describe in words." After thinking for 2 seconds, Ryuto gave such a vague answer. For the human body, the opening of Qi, or human microelectromagnetic field, was like swimming or riding a bike. It was a pure physical memory. These movements and techniques were actually difficult to describe in words, and it was also difficult to think about what was going on in the mind. In short, once you know it, and once you learn it, you can never forget it in your life. It's just that the opening and mastering of Qi was a mysterious state. It was many orders of magnitude higher than swimming. The difficulty of opening it was extremely high, and the difficulty of mastering it to be able to use it in battle was even higher. After the stimulation of the acupuncture points just now, although Ryuto had begun to perceive the existence of Qi, this level of opening was only a pure beginner level, equivalent to swimming to the level where he could just float on the water. When Long Do stood up, the old man held one of his fingers. Focus on the tip of this finger. You need to learn how to use your mind to control the movement of your Qi and blood. Only then can you use Qi to produce force. As the old man reached out to hold that finger, Long Do could feel a warm wave of air coming from that finger. Unknowingly, he also focused his attention on that finger. He could feel the invisible Qi and blood gathering at the tip of his finger, but when he moved slightly, the gathered Qi and blood disappeared in an instant. But according to the old man, this situation was completely normal. It took a long time to condense one's Qi and blood in a certain part of the body, and it took even longer to make the body muscles tremble to transmit force. Even if it was only the most basic, obvious force, it was impossible to develop it without 7 or 8 years or more than 10 years of effort, at least from a traditional point of view. But no matter what, the Qi in Ryuto's body had reached the preliminary level. Although he hadn't mastered it yet, it did exist, and he had achieved his goal tonight. Remember, before your Qi reaches the level where you can use hidden force, don't fight with Sai 2. A real man doesn't lie. Before Ryuto left, the old man Furamaki couldn't help but remind him again, as if he was afraid that this kid who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth would go to his death openly. Don't worry. Ryuto nodded with a smile and said solemnly, "If I break this promise, I won't be able to get a wife in this life. Is that okay?" The old man knew that Ryuto was an old pervert who was going to marry 3 wives, so this vow was poisonous. Thus, he nodded at the disciple who had made the oath, believing his words. "Sai. I hope that guy Sai too can die of old age early. Hopefully, he won't live until Ryuto masters hidden force." Looking at Ryuto's back, the old man who stayed in his small broken house sighed. Then he took out a straw doll with Sai 2 entering the Tao from the drawer, picked up a hammer and nail, and nailed it on the wall as if he was cursing that guy to die early. Of course, Ryuto didn't want Sai 2 to die early. He just wanted to kill that bastard with his own hands. Rustle. Puff puff puff. However, on the way back, Long Do, who was sitting in the back of the car, couldn't help but let out a burst of strange laughter, which made Ming Hai, who was driving in front, feel a little confused. "What's wrong with the boss?" After entering the old man's room for a while, he laughed like this. "Did something strange happen?" Thinking of this, Narukai's forehead couldn't help but drop a few drops of cold sweat. Ryuto naturally didn't know what this capable assistant was thinking, because he was already immersed in the pleasure of shopping. Now, Ryuto's personal attributes were like this. Name, Ryuto Kiryoage, 16 attributes, Wisdom LV2, Physique LV4, Courage LV3, Insight LV2, Charm LV4 Chi opening rate. 1% title, Beginner Assassin, obtained after 100 successful sneak attacks, presence reduced by 20% when equipped, equipment. Uzi submachine gun, rare, hook lock, good, equipment. None tools, rogue velcro, rogue analysis mirror, rogue voice changing mask, rogue glider skills, ancient Bajiquan, Furamaki style martial arts, iron bone mastery, copper skin mastery, parkour master, rogue immortality, silent movement, aura shield, omnipotent driver total assets, $172,870,000. Sure enough, this time there was an additional Chi opening rate in the attribute pane, which represented Ryuto's mastery of this new ability. 1% mastery was almost the beginner level, there was no way to use it in actual combat. But fortunately, the current Ryuto was still quite rich. At first, he saved 120 million to buy the special medicine to treat Rue Hui. After upgrading his charm, he spent 50 million and had about 70 million left. As for the remaining 100 million or so, it was a part of the assets that Ryuto plundered when he led the team to eliminate the White Tiger Gang and Psychedelic Saburo. Of course, the cash in the hands of the two gangs was definitely more than this, but after all, Kai Yang and Tessa were among the people who raided the property. Everyone had to divide the assets equally. And after the assets were divided equally, most of them had to be transferred to the public account of the Rulon Group. Ryuto himself could only get a part of it, which was about 100 million or so. But even so, 100 million or so was not a small amount, not to mention that after 3 days, there would be a larger sum of 300 million, which was the money for John's redemption. In other words, until the princess coming-of-age ceremony, a week later, the amount of money that Ryuto could use was about 470 million or so. It could be said that it was the largest sum of money he had so far. At this time, Ryuto had to think about how to use this large sum of money. He now had the attribute of LV4 Physique, International Warrior. If he collected more money to reach 500 million, he could upgrade Physique to the highest level, LV5, Extreme Superman. But if he did not choose to upgrade it to the highest level at this time, the 500 million or so in cash could be used to buy a large number of skill books, equipment, and other upgrade points. After all, Ryuto's current attributes were not very balanced. Wisdom and Insight were only at LV2, which was a bit worse than other attributes. If he upgraded these two attributes to LV3, he would only need to spend about 100 million or so, and the remaining money could be used to buy a lot of skills and equipment. It felt that upgrading was not worse than upgrading Physique from LV4 to LV5. What should I do? Forget it, the 300 million will only arrive in 3 days, I should go shopping first. Thinking about it, Ryuto opened the Krypton shopping mall and flipped to the column of skill books. Sure enough, in the skill shopping mall, there were a lot of internal force skill books that he had never seen before. Among all the skill books, internal force skill books was actually a separate column to browse, and the variety was much richer than expected. What were the normal internal force, Chen Kuan foundation technique, body strengthening technique, youth rejuvenation technique, heavenly cycle technique, etc. What were the literary skills, Indian secret technique, princess divine technique, test of the 8 extraordinary meridians, primordial pill sub-prescription technique, etc. What were the stupid skills? Breathing technique that even monkeys can understand, fasting divine technique for paupers, death in situ for 10 seconds, celestial concealment technique, etc. How to describe these internal force skills? It was just that they looked so mysterious, so ridiculous, so ridiculous. In particular, the names seemed to have come straight out of a book of Qigong literature that could be found on the streets. As for the effects of these skills, most of them could increase the Qi opening rate after cultivation, but each of them had a unique effect, and some of them were even ridiculous. For example, fasting divine technique for paupers, after cultivation, could extract energy from the air and sunlight, and could only eat a meal every few days without starving to death, although the side effect was that one would become skinny like a bag of bones. What was the use of this? There was also the death in situ for 10 seconds, after cultivation, could greatly increase the chi opening rate, but at any time, one could die in situ and ascend to heaven. What a scam! Wasn't dying in situ and ascending to heaven suicide? As for the other martial arts and secret methods, they were basically some very ordinary things that increased the opening rate of chi. Although the name was fancy, it was actually no different from the most basic, body-strengthening martial arts. After all, in the end, chi was not some kind of battle chi or chi force in fantasy novels, but only the development of the human body's latent ability. Martial artists who succeeded in cultivating chi could slow down aging, strengthen their bodies, and increase their combat strength. However, it was impossible to create 18 dragons with a single palm strike after cultivating to the limit. That would become a fantasy world. Chapter 218. Therefore, after looking around, Ryuto chose the most basic Chenkuan foundation building technique. He wanted to see what kind of changes would happen to the chi opening rate after cultivating the Nigong. However, the price of Nigong skill books was extremely high. Even the most basic skill book cost 20 million each. It was simply daylight robbery. Following his purchase of the skill book, Chenkuan foundation building technique appeared in Ryuto's skill bar. At this moment, this was the description of this skill in Ryuto's skill bar. Skill bar, Chenkuan foundation building technique, able to increase the opening rate of chi, 20% proficiency. The description of this Nigong skill was very simple. After learning it, Ryuto's attributes immediately changed. His chi opening rate was originally only 1%. After learning the Chenkuan foundation building technique, it immediately became 10%. Compared to before, it had leaped by 10 times. However, this 10% chi opening rate did not match the 20% proficiency of the Chenkuan foundation building technique. It seemed that for every 2 points of Nigong proficiency, the chi opening rate would only increase by 1 point. In other words, if he wanted the chi opening rate to reach the highest 100%, he would have to buy at least 2 Nigong skills and raise them to the maximum value. At least 2. Then he would choose this as the second option. After choosing for a while, Ryuto set his sights on a Nigong skill called Empress Mysterious Technique. The basic effect of this Nigong was to increase the chi opening rate. However, there was an additional effect which was to increase the yang chi of the cultivator. On Ryuto's body, it would be cough cough, good for them, good for me. Ryuto admitted that when he chose this skill, he had some impure intentions. However, he had no choice. Who told Ryuto to have 3 wives in the future? Moreover, one of them was a carnivorous woman like Yun Yen. If he did not have the means to strengthen that ability, he might die in bed one day. That would be too stupid. Just like that, Ryuto spent another 20 million yuan to purchase the Empress Mystic skill, increasing his chi opening rate to 20%. At this moment, Ryuto came out of the system world and slowly extended his right hand. With a thought, a chi, that was much hotter than before gathered on the palm of his hand. Moreover, it did not dissipate as the palm moved up and down, left and right, and rotated. It was still firmly wrapped around the palm of his hand. So that's how it is. Is this the situation after mastering chi? I feel like my body has become 2 layers. In layman's terms, after mastering chi, one would feel as if there was an invisible person in one's body. When Ryuto used his mind to control his body, he could also control the person in his body to perform the same or different actions. Not long after, Ryuto returned to the headquarters of the Rulong group and returned to his room. At the door of the room, there was a tree that was more than 20 centimeters thick. Ryuto came to the front of the tree and threw a punch at it. At the same time, he mobilized the chi in his body and spread it in that direction. Boom! When the punch arrived, the tree broke. The tree that was more than 20 centimeters thick was smashed like a bubble by Ryuto's punch. The most important thing was that Ryuto did not use much of his physical strength. Instead, he relied on the clear force produced by his chi to shatter the tree. With a chi opening rate of around 20%, he could already use the first stage of clear force. In other words, this was equivalent to Ryuto skipping the years of hard work that Furamaki Sotaro said in the blink of an eye. He suddenly had the strength of chi that was enough for actual combat. Oh, is this the first stage of clear force? Amazing. After Ryuto tried a few times, he found that using chi to stimulate clear force at the same time while attacking could increase the power of the attack by about 50%. Don't underestimate this 50%. Now that Ryuto had LV4 physique and the high lethality of ancient Bajiquan, one attack was already fatal. On this basis, an increase of 50% was already quite terrifying. The most important thing was that now Ryuto's chi opening rate was only 20%. In other words, he still had a lot of potential that had not been fully utilized. In the not-too-distant future, if Ryuto could have LV4 physique and chi opening rate of 100%, even he himself could not imagine how terrifying it would be. It was probably not much different from Superman. But even so, in fact, the current Ryuto was already on the road to becoming Superman. However, just as the youth here was immersed in the excitement and joy of getting a new toy, time passed by and the next morning came as promised. It had to be said that this was a depressing morning. The wind was strong, the rain was sudden, the dark clouds covered the city. Early in the morning, there was a continuous drizzle, giving people an ominous feeling of dark clouds covering the sky. However, in a villa with a huge courtyard in Tokyo's Chiyoda district, the master who lived here was obviously not overwhelmed by this depressing morning. Classical, solemn. First of all, after seeing this courtyard, the first words that would appear in the mind would be these 4 words. Although the modern world was like a wheel that forced everyone to move forward. However, this place seemed to have been frozen in time hundreds of years ago. The small stream flowed, the antique atmosphere, the green vines, and the various flowers and plants naturally set off the taste and value of this place, making it appear very fresh and elegant. And in the middle of this courtyard, there was a clear pool in a bamboo forest. Not far away, there was a brick path that led to a secluded place. The flowers were deep and the house was quiet. It was really a good residence. But this early in the morning, a very short figure was not afraid of the drizzle, standing alone by the spacious pool. Taking a closer look, this Saitu Ryu martial arts master, Saitu Ryu Do, was wearing a simple and loose outfit. His eyes were closed, and he was squatting next to the pool, as if he was concentrating. Hiss. After standing for who knows how long, Ryu Do suddenly inhaled, his short neck stretched out, his nose and mouth were like a suction fan, quickly inhaling the surrounding air into his abdomen. This time the inhalation was very fierce. The inhalation lasted for more than 10 seconds, during which there was no pause at all. Even in the process of inhaling, Ryu Do's abdomen was violently expanding, like a huge toad. At the same time, the man's limbs and all the muscles on his body were constantly trembling in the process of inhaling, as if they were being attacked by an electric current, as if every muscle had its own consciousness. Hiss. Hiss. After inhaling enough air, Ryu Do once again exhaled, only to see a huge wave of air gushing out from his mouth. The small pool in front of him rippled, as if it was being attacked by a gust of wind. Such a terrifying inhalation and exhalation, it was hard to imagine that it could be done by a human. If a thin and weak person was standing in front of Ryu Do, perhaps this breath would have blown him a few meters away. The terrifying scene just now was the result of one of the most profound energy arts of the tantric schools, the art of the locapella imparting profundity, a breathing incantation. Through breathing, constantly guiding the chi in the body to flow around the body, thus stimulating every cell, and maximizing the potential within. It could be said that in terms of the cultivation of chi, entering the Tao had already reached a rather profound realm. This was definitely not something that Long Do's petty 20% chi opening from yesterday could compare to. Clap, clap. Clap, clap, clap. Just as he was about to complete his morning breathing technique, a crisp clap suddenly rang out from behind him. Good morning, Mrs. Kawata. With the strength of Ryu Do, naturally, he had already noticed the figure standing at the garden entrance not far away. He also slowly turned around, and nodded to the woman in a Western dress. There was no doubt that the woman who appeared in the courtyard of Ryudo was the current owner and savior of Ryudo, Kawata Ya. From the outside, Kawata Ya was a middle-aged woman about 40 years old, but she obviously took good care of herself. Although she was not as beautiful as Rue Hui, who completely ignored the passage of time, she was still a dignified and elegant lady. Unlike most people's impression of Japanese empress, Kawata Ya was wearing a Western-style high-collared, long-sleeved dress made of velvet fabric. It looked graceful and elegant, and it was quite a perfect match for her temperament. Such a very capable woman, if there was no special indication, it was hard to imagine that she was the daughter-in-law of the Japanese royal family, the wife of the current Emperor Wu Toku. Moreover, after witnessing the breathing exercise of entering the Tao, which could be called a stunt performance, her expression did not change. Her expression was calm and natural, showing a calmness and courage that was completely different from that of ordinary women. Of course, Kawata Ya was such a person. After all, she was a woman who wanted to do great things, whether it was wisdom, courage, knowledge, or will, they were all at the top level. Mr. Ryudo, last night you saw Ryuto Kiryu again, what do you think of him now? When Kawata Ya said these plain words, it gave people a sense of stability, as if everything was under her control, even if it was a question. Obviously, this was a very easy woman to trust, because by her side, one would feel very calm. From a certain point of view, Kawata was actually the same type as I am. But when he heard that name, Ryudo frowned slightly, and said with disdain, "He is far from being my opponent now." In other words, you can kill him at any time, right? Not necessarily. Oh. Kawata Ya originally thought that Ryudo would say, "at any time," but she didn't expect him to say such a sentence. Chapter 219. Judging from his disdainful attitude towards Long Do when he had just entered the Tao, logically speaking, he should have looked down on that stinky brat. But in fact, that was not the case. Although he is not as good as me, he is already an outstanding expert of the younger generation, plus that kid has a lot of tricks up his sleeve. I dare not say that I can take his life at any time. Speaking of this, Access to Tao couldn't help but sigh. At the same time, he couldn't help but think of the scene last night. In the battle on the roof last night, Access to Tao clearly had the upper hand, but there was not a trace of fear on that boy's face. As everyone knows, there is no one who is not afraid of death. If someone feels that they are not afraid of death, it can only mean that they have never been close to death. Even Access to Tao, who has been on the verge of death dozens of times, will still unconsciously feel fear when facing the threat of death. This is human instinct. But last night, Ryuto's eyes and expression didn't show the slightest fear, as if he was sure that he would never die. Seeing that calm expression, Access to Tao didn't show any reaction on the surface, but in fact, he was very surprised. He is not afraid of death? No, he doesn't think that he will die at all. This kid must have hidden some powerful tricks up his sleeve. For this situation, Access to Tao can only explain that the kid still has some tricks up his sleeve. That is the only reasonable explanation. After all, he didn't think that there would be a person in the world who would buy a life for $1 million. This is a bit too outrageous. So that's how it is. This is Ryuto Kiryu. Even this kind of person who can almost be called a monster is not sure that he can kill him. Unfortunately, there is no way to recruit this kind of talent. If he falls to that point, he can only blame himself for not knowing how to appreciate kindness. After discussing a few more details with Access to Tao, Xiao and Tianya slowly walked outside to prepare for the princess coming-of-age ceremony that would be held 6 days later. But as the mother of Princess Fukudaheim, Kabato was responsible for preparing things that had nothing to do with her daughter, as if she didn't care about her daughter's situation at all. In fact, it was true, Kabato didn't care at all. The only thing she cared about was her career and her mission. His daughter was just an accessory in the mission. After the Empress left, Yi Zichen came to a bamboo forest by the pond alone. While enjoying the beauty of nature, he slightly raised the qi in his body and infused it into the finger of his right hand. He then pressed it down on a bamboo joint beside him. Crack. When the finger slowly pressed down on the hardest part of the bamboo joint, a crisp sound rang out from the bamboo joint. As the hand that had entered the dao slowly returned to its original position, a 3-inch deep fingerprint was left on the bamboo joint. Vajra's finger. This was the martial arts technique that was casually used by those who had entered the dao. If he were to use this move with all his might, even the strength of one finger would be enough to pierce through a steel plate. As for the human body, except for the brilliant martial artists who could use their qi and blood to strengthen themselves to a great extent. An ordinary human's body was like tofu in the eyes of those who had reached the Tao. They could destroy it however they wanted. Logically speaking, with his strength, even if he fought Ryuto 6 days later, he could easily kill him. Even so, now that he had stepped into the Tao, he felt an indescribable sense of foreboding. Why do I have this kind of feeling? He's just a teenager, who hasn't even released his qi. How can I be afraid of him? After shaking his head, Yi Zichen tried to get rid of the distracting thoughts in his mind as much as possible, not letting himself think about it anymore. Ryuto Kiryu. 1 week later, either you die, or I die. Before leaving, Yi Zichen finally said to the reflection in the pond. Obviously, he had made up his mind to take Ryuto's life the next time they meet. 6 days. There were only 6 days left before the princess coming-of-age ceremony that was destined to be a stormy event. In these 6 days, no matter what kind of thoughts people had about the upcoming event, or what kind of preparation they were secretly doing, the carriage of time would always reach the end without them noticing. 6 days later, in this late spring day, the wind was blowing, the flowers were blooming, and the young princess from the oldest family in Japan, Princess Fukudaheim's coming-of-age ceremony was also coming. Due to the particularity of this festival, for today's Tokyo and even the entire Japan, today can be said to be a day of great attention. As everyone knows, the Japanese royal family has completely fallen to the status of mascot in this era. But even so, the country still has to spend a lot of money to support them and let them enjoy a luxurious life. Although some people have also raised some objections, but supporting the emperor family is actually like raising pets in captivity for this country. In essence, it is no different from the pandas in the zoo. It's just that the emperor family eats more and takes more than the pandas, so they have to pay more. Among them, the biggest cost is naturally the daily life and personal privacy of their own family. As the mascot of the whole country, almost every move of the royal family is under the attention of the people. It's hard to say that there is any privacy, it's like a living display in a glass window. Especially an event like the princess's coming-of-age ceremony, which was supposed to be a joyous event for the whole family and no foreign guests, had long become a national entertainment that was broadcasted live and filmed by every TV station. After all, at this coming-of-age ceremony, you can see many ancient and cumbersome traditional customs, and you can also see the emperor's family collectively appear in the kokyo and take photos together. The feeling is much more interesting than going to the zoo to watch gorillas perform airplane shooting. And all these special performances will take place in the kokyo, in the tower that has spanned decades of history and was bombed and rebuilt by American. Kokyo, as the name suggests, is the residence of the emperor's family. This kokyo was located in the central area of Tokyo Chiyoda. Surrounded by water on all sides, the kokyo was quite conspicuous in the busy streets. In particular, the quaint palace building was even more out of place in this world. The surrounding moat separates the kokyo from the bustling modern city. This makes the palace where the emperor lives not so much like a palace, but more like a lonely city on an isolated island. Generally speaking, except for the outer areas such as the East Court and Kitano Maru Park outside the kokyo, the palace area covering an area of about 2,500 hectares is not open to the public, and there are not many people in it at ordinary times. Of course, it doesn't mean that there are no people today. After all, starting at about 10 o'clock this morning, the particularly eye-catching Princess Fukudaheim's coming-of-age ceremony will be held inside the kokyo. At that time, a large number of political and business leaders will gather here. Therefore, just before the hour hand in the morning pointed to 10 o'clock, a large number of reporters from various TV stations and online programs have gathered near the kokyo, outside the kokyo. They all set up their cameras and bombarded the guests who came to watch the ceremony indiscriminately. It's coming! Whose car is that? It seems to be the president of the Ling group. Hurry up and take photos. Hey, isn't that the CEO of Uni? Didn't he just promote abroad yesterday? He actually rushed back here early in the morning. That is the National Treasure level cooking immortal master millet. It is said that he has been cooking for 100 years. He is a living immortal. For the reporters stationed in Tokyo, today was undoubtedly a great day, because they could unscrupulously take photos and videos of this group of celebrities, who were rarely seen in their daily lives. The guests who came to watch the ceremony got off in front of the kokyo, and walked to the inner kokyo. Some walked quickly with their heads down, and some politely waved to the reporters in the distance. The guns and cannons on both sides of the road kept flashing. It didn't feel like a royal princess's coming-of-age ceremony. Instead, it felt like a strange fashion show. However, such a happy atmosphere completely disappeared with the appearance of a black car with a dragon's mark on the front hood. Rumble! Rumble! Accompanied by a very arrogant engine sound, the black car that didn't look low-key at all stopped outside the kokyo, and the royal etiquette officer standing at the gate in charge of greeting also walked over as usual. Wait. That car. It seems to be the exclusive car of the leader of the Rulon group, Tong Shang Kazuma? When the reporters saw the car that exuded an aura that was out of place with the other visiting cars, they realized the origin of the car. After all, the exclusive car of the leader of the Rulon group was quite famous. But according to the reporters' knowledge, Tong Shang Kazuma was now a fugitive, and it was said that he fled abroad. Some people even saw him drinking vodka while fighting with a white bear in Siberia. Now, the second-generation Mu Tong Shang Longdo was in charge of the Dragon Group. Although he was only 16 years old, it was said that he was vicious and merciless. His methods were cruel, and he was guilty of all kinds of crimes. He was the ultimate scum from head to toe. No way. Could it be? When they thought of this, some of the reporters trembled as they looked at the car that just opened the door. They saw the young man sitting in the back seat of the car step out. When the young owner of the car opened the door and walked out with the royal etiquette officer, he was exposed to hundreds of cameras. Almost everyone who saw him was stunned. Of course, the person who came to the princess coming-of-age ceremony in this car was Ryuto, who was warmly invited by the current empress. But today he was clearly dressed up, and he looked very domineering. Chapter 220. Because he was going to attend a formal event, Ryuto still wore a three-piece business suit with a high collar made of satin fabric, which made him look more mature and decent. However, unlike the one he wore in the Star Python apartment, the suit this time was white, and there was a very conspicuous dark golden dragon embroidery from the back to the shoulder area. The white suit was adorned with black dragon embroidery. The contrast of white and black accentuated this young man's characteristics to the greatest extent, especially the gold-rimmed black dragon that was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws on his shoulder. It simply made people feel that unconventional domineering demeanor with just a glance. The most exaggerated thing was that after getting out of the car, Longdo actually wore a pair of pure black sunglasses that he usually didn't wear. It made his originally very lethal and fierce face even more intimidating. "Please, come in." After helping Ryuto open the door, the royal etiquette officer who came to greet him couldn't help but be stunned for a moment, then a few drops of cold sweat fell from his forehead. Humph. Longdo, on the other hand, stepped out of the car. His pair of sunglasses covered his eyes as he scanned the reporters around the Kikyo gate. He then strode in arrogantly without a care in the world. He slightly raised his head, straightened his back, stepped forward, and his hands moved rhythmically on both sides. The young man's walking posture was actually very standard, but for some reason, he always had a domineering and arrogant attitude that looked down on others. It was as if the magnificent Kikyo gate and the kokyo in front of him were nothing in front of him. It had to be said that although Ryuto's attitude was arrogant, he was really handsome. His already handsome appearance, coupled with his level 4 charm, which was enough to become an international idol, and his unique clothing made him look like a dragon among men. It was as if a young godfather from a movie had come to reality. Because Ryuto's appearance and aura were too shocking, the surrounding reporters couldn't help but quickly raise their cameras and take 10 shots of Ryuto from all angles. Flashes flashed everywhere, and the sound of buttons clicking could be heard. For a moment, the entrance was particularly lively, and the expressions of the reporters gradually became excited. After all, it was rare for this all-powerful second-generation leader to appear in public, let alone in such a special place. However, when Ryuto sensed that a large group of people around him was taking pictures of him, he came to an area less than 10 meters away from the Bellflower Gate. He slowly raised his left hand and made an international friendly gesture to the reporters on his left. Convex. Before the reporters on the left could recover from their shock, he slowly raised his right hand and made the same international friendly gesture. Convex. Immediately after, the reporters on the right were stunned. He raised his hands together and made a friendly gesture towards the huge royal palace in front of him. Convex. At this moment, all the surrounding reporters were stunned. The royal etiquette officer was also stunned. Not far away, the security team members who were watching the gate were also stunned. Am I seeing things? The leader of the extreme Dao stood at the entrance of the Japanese royal palace and raised his middle finger to the surrounding reporters and the palace in front of him. Although most of the reporters were shocked by Longdo's actions, there were still a few brave reporters who took photos from various angles that would go down in history and posted them on the internet. XXXX year, the leader of the Rulon group, Ryuto Kiryo, was paying his sincere respects to the Kokyo. At the bottom of the photo, the reporter used his trembling hand to type in this sentence. However, perhaps because the reporter was shocked, this sentence was not so much an introduction, but more of a sarcastic remark. It was not difficult to imagine what kind of sensation this photo and the fact that Ryuto went to the princess's coming-of-age ceremony would cause if it was posted on the internet. After all, it was already shocking that an extreme Dao boss was invited by the royal family to attend the princess's coming-of-age ceremony, not to mention that he went to the palace and raised his middle finger. It was simply too arrogant. Although the royal power of Japan had declined, the Kokyo was still something that represented the face of the country. Unfortunately, the face of the country was now like being publicly slapped by the extreme Dao young master, and it was a slap in the face. After all, who would understand the face of the country if you told Ryuto about it? Anyway, they had already shed all pretense of cordiality, so why should I save face for you? The most important thing was that this time, it was Kobayashi who strongly invited him to come, and for this invitation, she even used Access Dao to threaten him. This kind of action made Ryuto very unhappy, so he had been prepared for the past few days. He was holding back his anger and was ready to make a scene inside. Kokyo, right? I'm here, don't regret it. However, just as he strode arrogantly into the imperial palace inside, what appeared in front of him was the royal palace square that was covered with gravel, grass, and trees. Standing in the palace square, one could see the walls of the palace and the famous scenic spot, Mitsubishi Bridge. Mitsubishi Bridge was a special passage that led to the palace. It was said that only high officials and nobles could pass through this bridge. At this time, around the bridge and in the nearby square, there were armed guards everywhere. Obviously, for the princess's coming-of-age ceremony, the royal family had done enough preparation. When Ryuto stepped on the Mitsubishi Bridge, the guards on the bridge couldn't help but look at him with suspicion and vigilance in their eyes. After all, this guy's clothes, appearance, and temperament were not the same as the group of people who came to participate in the ceremony. This time, the guests invited to the princess's coming-of-age ceremony were all rich and noble. Most of them were members of the Yatsuki group, so their gestures revealed a fake upper-class atmosphere. But Ryuto was different. This guy looked like he was here to make trouble. After feeling the guard's vigilant gaze, Ryuto reached out his hand and pointed at his temple, and sneered, "What are you looking at? If you have the ability, then shoot me here. If you don't have the ability, then go back and drink milk." The guard who was ridiculed by Ryuto blushed, but he could only turn his head immediately and didn't dare to look at the extremely arrogant leader. Coward. Leaving such an appropriate adjective, Ryuto swaggered across the Mitsubishi Bridge and entered the palace area surrounded by the walls. The tall walls were filled with ancient trees, hundreds of thousands of trees from all over the country. The palace buildings were scattered among the trees, which looked very different from the palace imagined by ordinary people. The so-called palace here was just a house built with large stones. Looking at it, it was all green tiles and white walls. The chrysanthemum family pattern symbolizing the Japanese royal family could be seen everywhere. It was very coquettish. Such a complex of buildings was not lacking in elegance and simplicity, but it lacked a bit of vastness and grandeur. If someone told you that this was a desolate resort villa, no one would not believe it. Because of the preparation of the celebration, the interior of the palace was very lively. Everywhere you could see people walking in the direction of the main hall or chatting under the surrounding eaves and trees. Most of this group of people were well dressed and elegant. At first glance, you could tell that they were serious guests, unlike Ryuto, who was dressed like a noisy upper-class hooligan who came to make trouble. The main hall of the palace was the center of the palace. The main activities of the royal family and diplomatic ceremonies were held in the pine pavilion of the main hall. Under the surprised, disgusted and curious gaze of many people, Ryuto swaggered to the entrance of the main hall. But just as he was about to go in, a hand patted his butt. Although Ryuto was indeed very handsome and charming, there were not many people who dared to take advantage of him like this. Section Chief Teshima, it's not good to greet in public like this. However, although he was patted on the butt, Ryuto could only reveal a dumbfounded expression. He turned his head and said to the female section chief who was hiding in the corner. She looked cold but secretly touched a man's butt. Of course, the one waiting for Ryuto here was naturally the section chief of the Search Division 1st Division, Teshima in Hana. Today's Teshima in Hana was different from the time when she went to the Rulon Group headquarters to investigate. Because it was a formal occasion, she wore a valiant policewoman uniform and also put on light makeup. This kind of outfit made in Hana look more beautiful. Coupled with her dignified and cold appearance, her incomparably flirtatious personality was even more tempting. No matter how you looked at it, she looked like an indecent policewoman who would appear in a small movie or a small manga. As a high-ranking member of the Metropolitan Police Department, Teshima in Hana was naturally qualified to participate in such a celebration. But after seeing Ryuto, she tilted her head and signaled the two to talk in detail. Then she walked to the side of the garden. What does this girl want to do? Is she trying to take advantage of me at this time? Looking at the figure of Inhana walking to a secluded garden on the side of the main hall, Ryuto couldn't help but gulp. Due to the special nature of this operation, Long Do came alone. He didn't bring anyone with him this time. Although Rue Hui would also participate in this celebration, in order to not let people discover her special relationship with Ryuto, the two would not have any open communication in this celebration. As for Lu Li herself, she was with Ji Ji and Gao Yuan in a building not far away. They were ready to help Long Do deal with any trouble that might arise at any time, doing the logistics work. The other two leaders of the Black Hand Alliance, Kai Yang and Tessa, who were originally invited, directly rejected the request to attend this time and also advised Ryuto not to go. After all, the royal family was obviously up to no good. Why should he take the initiative to go there? Of course, Ryuto didn't understand Kai Yang and Tessa's thoughts, but young people had a rush. Even if it was a dragon's pool or a tiger's den, he still wanted to go there. Not to mention that the other party had provoked him in the face. If he didn't fight back, wouldn't it be extreme? Therefore, Ryuto decided to take a trip to the Kokyo, but he didn't expect to meet such a dangerous woman before entering the main hall. Although Teshima in Hana's nominal identity was the section chief of the Metropolitan Police Department, don't forget that this woman was actually a general under Iam, the head of the Qianmu Group Guard Department. In terms of identity, the cadres of the minister were second only to Iam in the Qianmu Group, which meant that in Hana's status was actually extremely high. The most important thing was that this woman also liked Ryuto very much, the kind of like that she wanted to eat him up. Chapter 221. It didn't take long for Ryuto to follow Lin Hua to a garden not far from the main hall. The garden was currently in full bloom. All kinds of flowers were contending with each other in terms of their beauty. The fragrance of the flowers in the garden assailed everyone's nostrils, causing the fragrance to spread from 10 miles away. However, after Lin Hua came to the corner of the garden, she looked around, and then quietly motioned Ryuto to stand in the corner of the flower bed. "What's going on? Is this girl planning to do something to me here?" Just as Ryuto was thinking about the scene where the two almost did it in the living room last time, Lin Hua had suddenly reached out and pulled his body into the flower bed. Plop! Accompanied by a muffled sound, the bodies of a man and a woman fell into the 1-meter-tall shrub at the same time, and formed a very ambiguous position of the man on top and the woman on the bottom. Hiss! Ryuto, Kun, you are so handsome today. After falling into the flower bushes, the heroic and cold female section chief suddenly stuck out her rosy tongue and licked her lips that were smeared with lipstick. Then, she reached out and wrapped her arms around Long Do's neck, like a beautiful lady who was about to have an affair with her lover. Dong dong! When he saw Lin Hua's little tongue, Ryuto couldn't help but feel his heart beat faster. After all, he now had a preliminary understanding of the taste of women. In addition, the female section chief was still wearing an ascetic policewoman uniform. Her legs wrapped in gray stockings were wrapped around Ryuto's legs. Coupled with the encirclement of her arms, she pulled Ryuto closer to her delicate body. Their bodies were almost pressed against each other, and they were hidden in the sea of flowers that emitted an enchanting fragrance. The scene was extremely ambiguous. Suddenly, Ryuto could only smile bitterly. That. Lin Hua, it's not good for us to be like this here, right? What can I do? Who told you not to come to me during this time, little, bad, egg? Lin Hua said in a coquettish tone, while her head was close to Ryuto's ear, and she gently blew beside his ear. It had to be said that Toku Shimarihana was indeed top-notch when it came to seduction. At this moment, their bodies were stacked on top of each other. Ryuto could feel how bouncy her mature body was. Moreover, being blown by her ear like this, even an Iron Man would not be able to help but feel a little restless. If it was any other time, Ryuto wouldn't mind playing with this female section chief, even if it was to build a relationship with her in order to prepare for the fight with Iam in the future. But now was not the time. Besides, this was the famous Kokyo, the nest of the royal family, and it was the critical moment when the princess's coming-of-age ceremony was about to take place. Ryuto, a mafia boss, was fooling around with the head of the Metropolitan Police Department's investigation department in the garden of the Kokyo. If anyone were to find out, it would be the biggest mistake in the world. Even 100 bows from the Metropolitan Police Department wouldn't be enough as an apology. Of course, the most important thing was that the two were hiding in the flower bed. He didn't know if Colored Glaze, who was observing them from afar, would find out. If she did, it would be over. Since Ryuto decided to explore the tiger's den 6 days ago, he naturally discussed a lot of countermeasures with Colored Glaze and the others. One of them was the comprehensive surveillance of the Kokyo. In fact, from the Emperor's point of view, the location of the Kokyo was really awkward. After all, this damned place was in the center of Tokyo. Other than the green space and a few run-down houses in the middle of his house, there were tall buildings everywhere. Looking out from the Kokyo, the tall buildings were arranged in rows, and the glass walls were colorful. It was a sharp contrast to the so-called palace's cold color and stone walls. As mentioned before, the so-called palaces and other buildings here were very short. They didn't look like palaces, but more like some suburban holiday villas. Therefore, looking down from a high place, it was easy to overlook the Kokyo. In fact, this was one of the selling points of many buildings around the Kokyo. It could overlook the palace and the emperor's family from the top every day. It could be said to be the best place to see the monkey. In this case, Colored Glaze, Sensible, Gao Yuan, and the others rented some units on the top floors of the surrounding buildings. Then, they used high magnification cameras to film the Kokyo from all directions. They could almost see most of the scene inside. In order to prevent anything from happening to Ryuto, who was attending the ceremony alone, and also to prevent any possible tricks that Kawada might play, Colored Glaze and the others naturally kept an eye on the situation here. As for whether he would be able to see the dragon duel in the corner of the garden, even he wasn't sure. If Colored Glaze saw him being pulled into the bushes by this woman, the consequences would be unimaginable. Ryuto would probably consider pulling out a gun and shooting himself in the head. As if sensing Ryuto's predicament, Rinhana chuckled in his ear. Don't worry, this corner is a blind spot in the Kokyo. It can't be seen from the outside. Don't worry about your little girlfriend finding out. You seem to know a lot of things. After hearing Rinhana's words, Ryuto couldn't help but frown slightly. This meant that Rinhana knew that Ryuto had sent people outside to monitor this place. And the head of the search department smiled. Don't forget who I am. You're living with Colored Glaze Kanzaki, and you're also related to Yunyen Suki. You're so young, yet you've already learned how to have one foot in two boats. How greedy! Logically speaking, even if Tajima Rinhana was the head of the search department, she might not know about Ryuto's personal situation. But if she knew about her second identity as the head of the Tenmu group, then it wasn't strange for this woman to know about these things. From the beginning, Ryuto didn't deliberately hide his relationship with Colored Glaze and Yunyen because it was useless to hide it. With Ayam's intelligence-gathering ability, it was impossible for her not to find out. However, Ryuto pretended not to know about Rinhana's second identity at this time. Instead, he smiled bitterly. I didn't expect that the head of the Metropolitan Police Department would like to investigate these kinds of gossip. It's really a waste of talent. No. How can you say that it's a waste of talent? As long as it's related to Ryuto Kuin, I want to know about it. Having said that, Tajima Rinhana reached out and touched Ryuto's face, then her fingers slid down his masculine cheeks, across his strong chest, abdomen, and then to his waist. Just when Rinhana's hand was about to touch a strange part, Ryuto finally couldn't help but hold her slender wrist, and his expression became a little awkward. Rinhana's fingers were soft and cold, and it was very comfortable to touch. If it was at ordinary times, Ryuto wouldn't mind being touched by her, but at this time, he didn't want to. Seeing Ryuto holding her wrist, Rinhana couldn't help but laugh. Oh. What's wrong? Are you shy? Haven't you done it with your two little girlfriends? We are still high school students, and we follow the proper etiquette when we communicate. You are obviously two-timing, but you still have the nerve to say that you are proper, what a little rascal. After being poked by Rinhana, Ryuto didn't know how to answer for a while, so he could only remain silent. Let's talk about something serious. Seeing this handsome Extreme Do group leader being forced to retreat step by step, the smile on Rinhana's face became even wider. She put on some light makeup to make her face look even younger and more beautiful. She moved closer to Long Do's face so that the two of them stared at each other. It was almost as if their noses were going to touch. Today, Kanata-chan and Tenya definitely don't have good intentions when they invited you here. You should have noticed this, right? That's for sure. After all, I have some history with that girl, and it's normal for her to want to mess with me. It would be fine if we were outside, but here, you are in a state of isolation and helplessness, which makes it easy for you to be at a disadvantage, so I think you need an ally, a reliable ally. In fact, from a practical point of view, Ryuto was not isolated and helpless, because his ally Kandai Ruehue was also present in the main hall, not far away. Of course, Ryuto wouldn't be so stupid as to tell Rinhana such a thing, so he smiled gently and said, Rinhana sister, the ally you are referring to, could it be yourself? Smart. Rinhana licked her lips, and at the same time, she took a deep breath of Ryuto's majestic manly scent, and an intoxicated expression appeared on her face. Ever since she saw Ryuto at the Rulon Group headquarters, Tokushima Rinhana had always been very fond of this handsome and domineering young man. She even used him as a side dish for her DIY every night. In Rinhana's bedroom, there were pictures of Ryuto everywhere, and there was even Ryuto's pillow on the bed. It could be said that she had been deeply poisoned by this extremely handsome guy with LV4 charm. In fact, from Rinhana's point of view, she shouldn't be so close to Ryuto. After all, whether it was her identity as the Metropolitan Police Department chief or the head of the Tenmu group, she had an absolutely hostile relationship with Ryuto. Ryuto would die at the hands of Ayam, Sama sooner or later. This was something that Rinhana had already confirmed. However, if such a handsome guy who completely suited Rinhana's taste died just like that, in her opinion, it would be a bit of a pity. In other words, even if Ryuto had to die in the end, he had to be played with by Rinhana first before he could die. At the very least, he had to let her reach the pinnacle of 100 times. Therefore, getting Ryuto Kuin's young and charming body as soon as possible was Rinhana's current biggest goal in life. So she said to Ryuto in a serious tone, "Ryuto Kuin, come and be my lover. In this case, I will provide you with all my strength. Is this a deal?" Ryuto had long been mentally prepared for Tokushima Rinhana's request. After all, what was this crazy woman thinking every time they met? It was really a question that an idiot could think of. "It's a deal, because our relationship is limited to lovers. Unlike your two cute girlfriends, you don't have to be responsible for me, and I won't be responsible for you. Hoo-hoo, let's just ask for physical and mental pleasure. How about it?" Looking at Ryuto's hesitant expression, Rinhana panted slightly and said in a tone that seemed to be unable to hold back. Chapter 222. There was no doubt that Tokushima Rinhana was an infatuated woman, and it was the type that was obviously infatuated with Ryuto. Even in addition to being an infatuated woman, Ryuto also knew that this woman had obvious comedic tendencies. Especially when she was tickled, she would be particularly happy. In the original Red Album 2, No Survivors, it was clearly shown how Tokushima Rinhana was subdued by Tenmu Ayam. In fact, it was just a tickle. La la la. Oh. Ayam. Sama. Ha ha ha. It's so ticklish. You're really a pervert, Inhana. Follow me in the future. Yes. Yes. At that time, the scene of Tokushima Rinhana being tickled by Ayam in the game caused a huge protest in the player community. The reason for the protest was very simple, because the characters in the game were not dubbed. In the case of no dubbing, the players could not hear the sound of Sister Inhana being tickled. How could they not protest? The players condemned the game production company for being immoral. They couldn't even afford to hire a dubbing actor. Such a great scene without proper sound effects was simply a waste of God's gift. Because Inhana's popularity was too high and the scene in the game was too famous, there were even players who spontaneously created Sister Inhana's exclusive voice pack, specifically to match the scene with a suitable voice, so that the players would enjoy listening and watching. Of course, that was a matter in the game. In the real world, Tokushima Inhana naturally did not need dubbing. Her original voice was good enough. Especially when this woman with strange interests wanted Ryuto to be her lover, the devilish voice was simply devilish. If it was in the game, it would be at a level that would not pass the censorship. Dangerous. It's too dangerous. It can't go on like this. After feeling Tokushima Inhana's obviously happy state at this time, Ryuto couldn't help but secretly frown. In fact, if Inhana could become Ryuto's ally, then her assistance would be very useful in many of the following events. After all, this woman was the ultimate mole. But it was conceivable that if Ryuto now agreed to be her lover, then Inhana would probably not hesitate to go on a rampage on the spot and directly eat Ryuto's skin. Although Ryuto was not a traditional man who treated sex as his life, in his heart, his own people should at least be given to his girlfriend, wife, or future wife. How could he give it to this kind of woman? So even if they were just lovers who used each other, Long Do didn't want to make this woman happy. Although he might be very happy himself, he would be letting Lioli, Yun Yen, and Dunia down if he did that. But if he didn't agree to Inhana's request now, then she wouldn't help in the next princess coming-of-age ceremony. This was still a very troublesome matter. If Inhana could help in this incident, then Ryuto's chances of winning would definitely be much higher. He naturally hoped to reach an agreement with Inhana. What should I do? Should I agree? Or should I say, wait. Didn't she just want to be happy? Then wouldn't it be fine to make her happy? However, just when Ryuto was pressed into the flowers by Tokushima Inhana and could be eaten up at any time, his mind suddenly remembered the scene he had seen before, which was the scene where Ayam and Inhana tickled each other. If he wanted to make this female section chief happy, he didn't have to sacrifice himself for righteousness. He could use other means. When he thought of this, the corners of Long Do's mouth curled up into a smile. After that, he quickly moved Lin Hua's trembling body to the side with the moon in the ocean. Originally, Long Do was pinned to the ground, but with a flip, a grab, and a throw, he skillfully pinned the woman to the ground. Oh! After being pressed into the flower bed by Ryuto, the expression on Inhana's face became even more pleasant. She giggled, and after laughing for a while, she smiled and said, "So that's how it is. Do you like this kind of thing? Then, slap." But before Inhana finished speaking, a palm had already scratched the itchy flesh on her abdomen at lightning speed. The speed was so fast that it was impossible to guard against it. Of course, Ryuto pressed this woman down for no other reason than that it was convenient to tickle her in this position. That was all. Although she was already over 30 years old, Inhana had always been very good at managing her body. Whether it was her waist or her arms, they were quite beautiful, and her skin was tight and elastic. With this scratch, Ryuto felt as if he was scratching a surprisingly soft and smooth jelly, and there was even an obvious rebound force. Puff. Ha 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 ha. After being scratched at the itchy flesh on her abdomen, the itch spread throughout her body along with excitement. Inhana's body trembled violently, and at the same time, she let out a strange laugh. Dragon! Ryuto-kun? You! Swish! Before he finished speaking, he reached out and scratched again, but this time, he scratched Inhana's armpit, which was more likely to itch. Moreover, from the looks of it, he seemed to be using more force than before. With Ryuto's current hand strength, scratching a person's body was no joke. He could really achieve the effect of scratching with a prop. Inhana suddenly opened her mouth wide. She wanted to laugh, but she couldn't, and her body trembled even more violently. Her slender legs twisted subconsciously, and the more itchy it was, the more joy burst out in her heart, making her feel both physically and mentally comfortable. Humph, 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 there's hope. Let's keep scratching. Seeing that this crazy woman was getting more excited the more he scratched, Ryuto did not hold back, and continued to scratch with both hands. Walala, walala, walala. In this way, in the garden in the corner of the kokyo, a subtle and strange sound kept coming from the flower bed, and it was not until 10 minutes later that it gradually returned to normal. When Ryuto was sure that he had scratched Inhana, the section chief of the search department had already collapsed on him like a soft noodle. Her eyes were blurred, and saliva was dripping from the corner of her mouth. Her pretty face was red, and she looked like she had laughed too much. Suddenly, Ryuto smiled and asked in her ear, "Sister Inhana, are you satisfied with my service?" If it was a normal woman, she might have turned hostile on the spot after being scratched like this, but Inhana looked very satisfied. She took a deep breath, reached out and combed her sweat-soaked hair, and replied weakly, "Ryuto-kun, I didn't know you had such an ability. I almost fainted from laughing." Inhana did not know that Ryuto knew about her hobby. She only thought that Ryuto liked to play like this since he was born. For a moment, she liked this little handsome guy even more. After all, Ryuto was handsome and charming, and he liked to scratch her like this. He was simply Inhana's dream lover. Hee, as long as Sister Inhana is happy. Happy. But next time, I have to make my little lover happy. Speaking of this, Inhana touched Ryuto's head lovingly, and then slowly got up from the ground. Although Ryuto did not directly say that he wanted to be her lover, his actions just now were enough as an answer. This also caused Inhana to look at him differently. It seemed that she had no choice but to help. Well, there should still be time. After standing up from the flower bed, Inhana tidied up her clothes, and then smiled at Ryuto. "I will be waiting for orders at the Between 1,000 Grasses. If there are any problems, just contact me." As the head of the Heavenly Eye Group's guard department, Inhana naturally knew that there must be some unknown conspiracy behind Empress Wu De and Tian Ya's sudden actions. However, so far, the Heavenly Eye Group was still busy with their own affairs, and they had no time to pay attention to second-rate goods like Little and Tian Ya. Inhana's own sources of information were not enough to spy on the conspiracy, so she could only protect Ryuto from the side. After she got up, she said while pointing to a long and narrow courtyard in the south of the main hall, not far away. The between 1,000 grasses was generally a place for the participants in the main hall to rest. Now, most of the guests were also there, waiting for the official opening of the princess's coming-of-age ceremony. According to the previous announcement, Princess Fukudaheim's coming-of-age ceremony would be officially held at about 11 o'clock. After a series of ceremonies, the guests who came to watch the ceremony would eat in the Liansui Hall, not far away, and then prepare for the afternoon press conference.